also about Trump and the tariffs and all the different stories around there. China seeing Prince Andrew as a valuable channel as well. We'll talk about that. Also, the really interesting interview coming up a little bit later on in the programme about the doctors getting it wrong. This person who was about to go to Dignitas in Switzerland because he'd been told he had motor neurone disease, actually it was a misdiagnosis, and he's probably going to be okay now. So there's a lot going on there. And of course the
debate over assisted dying
all
rages on. Peter, I hope you have a fantastic show. I'm sure it will be. Thank you ever so much for your company this morning. Shall we do it all again next weekend? That's right, Saturday kick-off at 6. Peter's next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Sunday morning. And there's one question on my lips, which is why is Labour just not making our borders safe? There is a big story in the Sunday Telegraph today where the Prime Minister easing the rules for illegal migrants. Citizenship applications will be allowed, scientific age testing scrapped. What is the point of this? How is this in any way making us safer? How is this solving the problem of immigration? Let us know your thoughts. Why is Labour not making our borders safe? 0344 499 1000. We asked to speak to the Home Secretary this morning. She doesn't have time to speak to us. We'll hear from her a little bit. And other interviews, we'll also hear from the Shadow Business Secretary. He will be live with me a little bit later on, as will Ben Habib, the former MEP and chairman of the Great British Political Action Committee. We'll have our debate desk. They'll discuss all of this and the big issues that you want to talk about as well. Also, a little bit later on in the programme, a really interesting guy, Peter Williams. He was told that he probably had motor neurone disease. He was ready to take his own life. This is all to do with the assisted dying debate. Well, actually, that diagnosis was wrong. He'll be live in the studio. We'll talk to Brennan O'Neill as well. Why are anti-racists silent about the terrible ordeal of some of the hostages in Israel? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Starmer's Brexit reset, risking damaging a trade war with Trump, and also Trump signing executive orders to place tariffs on China, Mexico, and of course Canada as well. And Justin Trudeau, the floppy-haired fascist himself, has reacted to that. I want your reaction to all of these stories today, particularly the migration story. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice message. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can give me a ring, as the phones are going already, I can see there. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's get started. Loads to get through between now and 1 o'clock here on Talk. So we're asking the question this morning, why is Labour not making our borders safe? This comes after a story about the government watering down border laws designed to block illegal migrants from obtaining citizenship and to force them to submit to scientific age checks, because of course it is a big incentive for would-be migrants coming across in small boats to say that they are younger than they are. That also means they can go into our schools, and that has obvious implications as well. Let's talk to Ben Habib, who's a former MEP, he's chairman of the Great British Political Action Committee. Ben, very good morning to you. What do you think of this?
Well, I think it's awful. As I imagine you know, I think it's awful. The Labour Party seems to me don't really believe in the importance or privilege of British citizenry. They see, I think, people from across the globe as being equal in their rights to British citizens, even though it is the British citizen to whom the Labour Party, the elected governing party, owes their obligation. And it seems to have infected our political class quite generally that everyone has a right to this country. Everyone has a right to come to this country. Once they've come to this country, almost irrespective of how they get here, over a period of time, they will become naturalized, have a right either indefinitely to stay or they get British citizenry. And actually, I think, Peter, we need to be going completely in the other direction. We should recognize, as I'm sure the British people do, that we've lost control of our borders, not just illegal migration, but also legal migration. We've lost control. We've got far too many people coming to this country. And what we should do until we've regained control of our borders and settled the position is actually a moratorium, instituting a moratorium on the granting of the indefinite right to stay and a moratorium on granting British citizenship to anyone who's come to this country in the last 3 years and may come in the future. We've got to settle the position. We mustn't be giving away our citizenship. It's a privilege to be a British citizen, And in order to protect that privilege and to protect the people of this country, we need to have a moratorium right now until we've got a grip of the problem that we've created.
It's interesting, actually, when you think about the people who are pretending to be young. There are 1,300 illegal migrants caught. These are the only ones who've been caught pretending to be minors after the cases were flagged with officials. I mean, there are obvious incentives to pretend to be younger than you are, and it's sometimes difficult to tell exactly how old someone is. And there are obvious, very, very worrying things that can happen if someone is designated to be 16 when actually they're 19 or 20.
Yeah, obviously, they could end up, young male adults could end up in schools with vulnerable girls. I mean, call a spade a spade. I mean, that would be horrendous, wouldn't it? And but this is the thing, and it's not restricted to Labour. During the Conservative Party's governance, Border Force were basically instructed not to make too heavy a set of inquiries of those coming to this country, that they could be traumatized, and that even if they're suspected of telling lies, they shouldn't be interrogated too deeply. I don't know if you remember that. And there was a situation, for example, when asylum seekers were given a moratorium on having to be actually physically interviewed. They were given a protection on that. They just had to fill in paperwork and it was automatically passed. We've lost control of our borders. We've got to recognize that. We won't know how to control our borders, how to make sure people don't lie about their age, how to make sure people genuinely have a right to be here before, without actually recognizing first that we've lost control.
Yeah.
That's what's happened. Our government has lost control.
I would love to have spoken to Yvette Cooper this morning. I did ask her advisor if she could come on. She didn't have time, but she's been speaking to Sky News and she spoke about foreign workers and indeed the EU. Let's hear what she said about foreign workers this morning.
We're currently drawing up further measures that will particularly target these areas that you rightly talked about, whether that be in IT, it be in construction, it be in engineering, where for far too long we have been recruiting from abroad and failing to train here in the UK. So there has to be, I think, more requirements on employers. For employers who are wanting to be able to recruit from abroad, actually what they should be doing instead is showing that they are training and recruiting here in the UK.
Yvette Cooper was also asked about her relationship with the EU. This is what she said.
No, I think the Chancellor said, look, we'll look at reducing ways to reduce frictions. That's absolutely the right thing to do, but we're not returning to a customs union. But those are all the sorts of things that, if you look at, what are the different ways in which you can reduce bureaucracy for business, that is the right thing to do. But you do it in a framework which says, we are outside the EU, we're not returning to the EU, that's been clear, we need to move on and build those better, stronger trading relationships to support businesses.
All right. Ben, what do you make of what Yvette Cooper has been telling Sky News this morning?
Well, as far as the migrant issue is concerned, it's the government that set too low a hurdle for people being allowed into this country. Under the Conservatives, they introduced a point-based system, so-called skills-based, points-based system. But, the minimum salary was set at £26,000 per annum, which is, 25% below the median wage in the UK.
It has gone up, though, Ben, hasn't it?
It is. It has. I think it's 38,000. But even that's not a massive hurdle over which to get. I mean, we shouldn't be allowing businesses to take people other than the very best qualified academics, doctors, and so on, and highly successful businessmen coming to this country. We don't need cheap, unskilled labour or cheap, even semi-skilled labour coming to this country, undermining wages for British workers. I'm sure that's a fundamental part of why we've got 7.2 million people in this country surviving now on universal credit. That figure a year ago was 6 million. Before the pandemic, that figure was 3 million. It's absolutely skyrocketed. And that skyrocketing in people claiming universal credit has happened at exactly the same rate at which our immigration has skyrocketed. So I can't say there's a cause and effect, but there's a huge parallel.
It's a big coincidence, if nothing else.
It's a big
Ben.
coincidence.
Absolutely. Ben, thank you.
And then on the
sorry,
EU,
go ahead.
Can I just say quickly on the EU, you can't reduce friction in trade without adopting the regulatory regime that is the European one, and that means getting closer to European laws. Yvette Cooper is lying if she's saying that we can reduce friction in trade without actually mimicking the EU regulatory framework, in which case we shouldn't have left. What we've got to do is ditch EU regulations. We've got to wake up to what America's doing. They're going to supercharge their economy. If we keep hitching our bandwagon to the EU, we're going to see our economy even more greatly damaged. Trump is going to shine a light on what's so wrong with the European economic model. And if we don't get on board with the Trumpian model, we are going to lose out big time.
Although isn't he taking a huge risk in terms of the large level of tariffs, or maybe that risk you think will pay off, Ben?
Well, actually, Peter, tariffs, the global free trade that we've had over the last few decades has gone, that too has gone out of control. And think of free trade as reverse immigration. You're offshoring jobs. It's not quite the same as taking people onto your shores to do those jobs, but you're giving away British jobs to foreign entities. And I think Trump has realized that we've had far too much free trade. It's created geopolitical risk. We have empowered China. We've made China a really rich country on the back of its exports. It has now used that money that we've given them to become a military superpower. We've got to readjust the whole global economic ecosystem, and tariffs is one way of doing it, and I think Trump's woken up to it.
Okay, Ben Habib, thank you very much for your contribution this morning. Ben is a former MEP, he's also chairman of the Great British Political Action Committee. Lots of people getting in touch this morning. We'll talk to Jackie in Oldham in a second. Morning, Peter, says, Jane, this government is helping the world, protecting the borders of others while opening ours to the world. UK citizens are at the very back of the queue. This government is disgusting. Andy says, I think everybody is missing the point about illegal migration. If you want to disable an economy, flood the country with people. Our government is blind to what is happening. Paul says the government should be held accountable for any crimes committed by illegal migrants that they have allowed to stay in without proper checks. Alison in St Albans says Labour's relaxation of rules for citizenship for illegal migrants is obvious why it's being done. It's gerrymandering the vote in Labour's favour, says Alison, who also wishes me well and is glad I'm feeling better. Thank you. Mick in Wallington says Starmer is hated more by the British public than Prince Andrew. I don't know about that, Mick, but certainly there are strong feelings about both. Labour are not making our borders safe, Peter. It's criminal what they're doing, says this person. They're on a mission to destroy our country, says this texter. Sharon in Staffordshire. Good morning, Peter. Can Ben Habib be our Prime Minister, please? Laura in Kent says illegal immigrants, if they're granted asylum and citizenship, are they issued with a new British ID as they have none of their own? If so, are they allowed to vote after a certain period of time, say 5 years? This would make sense in regard to allowing so many in now. Starmer prefers Davos to Westminster, says this texter. Loads of messages coming in. That is his mindset. They want open borders over closed ones. We knew this before the election, and many knew the Labour government would be a disaster. Let's speak to Jackie in Oldham. Jackie, what do you think's behind all this? Thanks for your call this morning on 0344 499 1000. What do you think, Jackie?
In 2018, Theresa May signed the United Nations Global Compact for Migration. It's on the government website. In that pact, we promised that we would ensure that migrants had safe, orderly, and we took regular migration. Now, the reason why Border Force is going out to pick the people up in the middle of the waters is because we said we would have safe migration, orderly. That's why they put into hotels. The part of the pact said that we were not to put them into detention and that governments were to favourably promote why migration was good for the country. This pact is allied to the United Nations Agenda 2030, which is also on the government website, which says, as part of the Sustainable Development Goals, their utopia, the globalist utopia, is that countries will not have borders and that people will be able to migrate to wherever they want to migrate to. And this is why we've been led a merry dance for so many years, because 2018 was when the people started coming over in the boats, and that's when migration absolutely...
It's been a problem for longer than that, though, as well, and we know that people came across...
That was legal, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, there were the trains and there were the lorries as well. In terms of what the Conservative Party tried, we'll be talking to them a little bit later on, about half an hour's time, actually, in terms of what they tried to do, or attempted to do, anyway, this is small boat arrivals could almost never become UK citizenships. Is also the Labour government is also revoking legislation which give ministers the power to treat asylum seekers who refuse to undergo scientific age checks. That's one of the ones that really concerns me, Jackie. I don't know about you.
Absolutely, and the thing is, I would go even further on this, because if our government cannot keep us safe and protected, then they broke the social contract. What is the point of having a government in power that cannot keep us safe and keep our children safe? And I think that I, for one, I don't consent to be governed by these people that's going to put me and my family at risk.
Yeah. Jackie, you talk a lot of sense. That's Jackie in Oldham. Thank you very much indeed for that. Rebecca in the Peak District says, why don't we just recognise Starmer's actions as a dereliction of duty to British citizenships? Taff in Dover says, morning Peter, it's become more apparent each day Labour has no intention of curbing immigration. Neil says, Cardi P, the latest immigration moves by Labour are once again against the indigenous population. As an example, I am British, and so were my grandparents on both sides. I live in Switzerland, yet my wife can't get a British passport unless we live in the UK for 2 years. Meanwhile, an illegal immigrant can apply for a UK passport. How is that fair? Doesn't strike me as fair. We're asking the question today, why is Labour not making our borders safe? I'd love to ask that to the Home Secretary. We did ask her for an interview. She didn't have time. Paul in Milton Keynes says, to answer your introduction, why is Labour offering citizenship and scrapping age testing to illegal migrants? If they want to fast-track illegal migrant citizenship to increase Labour's vote count, I can see no other reason why you would grant illegal migrants British citizenship. Michael says, Ben is partly right about citizenship. However, why do we give citizenship at all? The Gulf countries have millions of immigrants who form a majority of the population, yet they never protest because, quite rightly, they are not citizens. Let's talk to Mary in Hemel Hempstead. Mary, thanks for your call. 0344 499 1000. What's your view on this issue?
Well, I can't understand why the unions over the years...
Oh, Mary, it's a terrible line. We'll try to get you back on a better line. We'll try and get you back after the break. Let me read a couple more messages, then we'll go to the break. Stuart says, Peter, Labour and their open door policy for migrants can't ignore the fact that Britain is overfull. We do not have enough space for housing, hospitals, reservoirs, energy and food security. Now food production is being sacrificed for solar farms. We do not have enough land for a comfortable life for British people, so we need negative migration for many years to come, says Stuart. And this person says, just say the illegals do have mental health issues because of what they witness in their country. Surely this is a bigger reason not to let them in. There will be a bigger drain on the NHS. It could be a mental health ticking time bomb. And Chris in Ottershaw says, good morning, Peter. Labour are going to gerrymander future elections by importing voters from abroad. They will return us to EU control against the will of the people. We should now refer to the Labour Party as the traitor party, says Chris in Ottershaw. Well, lots more views coming, including Mary's, if we get her back in a better line. After the break, we'll also talk to our debate desk people, who are Matthew Goodwin-Freeman and Matthew Laza. Matthew Laza is a former Labour advisor. I wonder what he makes of what his party is doing. And also Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, the political commentator and Conservative councillor. Stay with us for that here on Talk.
Conservatives wouldn't help me. I thought the Labour government would help me, but it doesn't seem like they are going to.
Right.
I tried to take it through the court system. I've tried to launch an independent police complaint, which has just been completely ignored. It's like nobody wants to find out what went wrong, and I'm just asking why. What is it that happened that we aren't allowed to know as a family?
Right.
Everybody wants to say that my dad was their friend,
Yeah.
but if you have a friend that was tragically killed like this, wouldn't you stand up for him and do what is right and fight for him? Because that is what he would do for them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Mo, who's been in touch and says neither the Tory nor Labour governments have lost control of immigration. The massive rise in numbers has been deliberate since Blair. The king knows why. Sandra says, I'm truly terrified. What if we are letting in the enemy? Will we be invaded from within? There are military-aged, healthy, strong-looking men coming in. Can Starmer assure me I am safe, that my family are safe? Christina says, hi Peter. It's all for votes to relax illegal immigration. Does he not realise they will vote for the independents that hold their beliefs? Labour are betraying the British people, says Christina. And Lorraine says, fact, Starmer lies like a cheap rug. He is a liar. He has lied continuously and repeatedly, and nothing that comes out of his mouth can be trusted or believed. An incompetent human rights lawyer who cares not a jot about the human rights for those he dislikes, the farmers, the elderly, the middle classes, the waspy women, the employers, the council taxpayers, and the far right. Do as I say, not as I do. We are in serious trouble. Surely he was elected on falsehoods and therefore must be held accountable, says Lorraine. I just get the sense she doesn't really like Keir Starmer.
I don't think she's a Labour voter.
No.
I'll put it down as undecided if I was canvassing.
That's my favourite now, two-tier cheap rug Keir. That's fantastic.
Two-tier cheap rug Keir. We are at the debate desk now with Matthew Goodwin Freeman, who is a Conservative councillor and political commentator, and Matthew Laza, former Labour advisor. Matthew, Labour under a lot of pressure. We're asking the question today, why is Labour not making our borders safe? The Prime Minister easing rules for illegal migrants. What do you make of this?
So I think Labour is taking action to make our borders safe, but I think that there are two issues this morning you've been examining. There's the issue about about the tests on whether people are actually genuinely under 18, and then there's the issue about what you do with people when they arrive, whether you allow them to apply for asylum.
It's for citizenship.
For citizenship, yeah. So it's whether they'd ever be granted settled status at all. So the problem with the two is I actually disagree with the government on the first. I think there should be checks on age, and actually I'm partly driven by that. I had a very, very illuminating conversation with a very good friend of mine, best friend, about a year ago, and she works with young asylum seekers in one of our northern cities, and she says that one of the big dangers is that you do get men who are over 18 put in there, and that endangers everybody, actually, not just the women and girls, but also the genuinely child asylum seekers. So I don't quite understand why the government is not pursuing this. It hadn't actually started, interestingly. Nobody has actually been tested yet. So, well, the Tories get themselves exasperated.
Well, they did bring the legislation in.
They did, but
there will be many people who feel that Labour simply don't have a grip on this and that they aren't actually stopping the boats in any way. I mean, they say they're doing things to smash the gangs and so on, but there don't seem to be many things that they're doing anyway to disincentivise people coming to our shores, Matthew.
Well, I think that the bill that's been proposed, the legislation that's been proposed in the last week, I think does contain actions that will really help with the gangs. It contains the provision that that if you refuse, for example, if you refuse to be rescued when you're in France and insist on coming to Britain, that you can get up to 5 years in prison. But to be honest, Labour has been clearer that you can't just wave a magic wand and stop the gangs, that it takes action across the whole of Europe. On the other half of today's so-called, the sort of revelations, which is the no path to citizenship, no path to settled status. The problem with that is that was the cause of the backlog in hotels, because basically you had people arriving here who were effectively in limbo because they were never actually going to be properly assessed in the system, and they were just going to basically, you couldn't send them back to where they came from if it was an unsafe country, and people were stuck in hotels. And I think that the listeners and viewers across the country don't want their local hotels taken up forever with people stuck in the asylum system.
Well, I think
so
a
you
lot
have
of
to
people,
get people processed.
well, I
which is
think a
what
lot
they're
of
able to
people will
do.
agree with that. Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, what's your take on this?
Well, I mean, that's why we were closing hotels and Labour are reopening hotels. But I was just listening to what you were saying, Matthew. We've got more legislation then, more words, but still no actions, and crossings are up 52%. You know, in the year before the Conservative government was kicked out, which we were kicked out because we lost control, absolutely happy to say that. I've always been happy to say we lost control, we deserved to lose the election. We had boat crossings down 33%. And that was without a single flight going off to Rwanda, without a single policy like that actually taking place, because we had a deterrent. And on day one, the Labour government got rid of the UK's deterrent, which was the Rwanda plan, and saying that you are not coming here. And now we've got hotels being reopened, backlogs growing and growing, and crossings are up 52%. And so, look, we're going to get more words, more legislation, but not action. And look, this is not an easy thing to fix. You saw the number of years that the Conservative government had to try and get something done, the number of bills that we had to go and get passed to repeal loads of historic laws and bring in new legislation and definitions. This is not a quick fix, but Labour said they would smash the gangs, and it's now been nearly 7 months.
Although you promised it, your Prime Minister promised a quick fix, and all the people currently sitting in the shadow cabinet stood around there while you had the sign saying "Stop the boats." It was the 3-word quick fix, and you didn't deliver it.
Well, boats were down a third, so
it's a very, very complex problem. And I think the issue is that the Rwanda wasn't an incentive that was going to work. 750 million quid.
Crossings were down.
Four people went voluntarily. What we need is a pan-European solution. Labour is not against offshore processing, and so we need to work together with our European allies to actually sort things and get the problem sorted at source before people ever arrive on our shores.
As promised, I want to let Mary in Hemel Hempstead have her say. We had a slight problem with the line a little bit earlier on. Mary, I think we've got you nice and clear now. What point would you like to make?
Well, it's just I can't understand why the unions have been so quiet since Tony Blair, because these people coming over aren't they going to join a union? And it's just got worse and worse. But they're absolutely silent.
Yeah, it's interesting that the unions do need to say more on this, don't they? They have been pretty active in regard to some of the deals that have been done with ASLEF train drivers and junior doctors and so on, though, haven't they, Mary? And this week, actually, at Prime Minister's Questions, it was interesting because Kemi Badenoch said the unions will be very happy with what Labour is doing in other areas.
Well, maybe in some areas, but you usually tend to think of them more like people in industry or whatever. No. You know, the poorer sort of section that pay. But it just doesn't make sense to me, because this has been like this since Tony Blair opened the gate.
It's a very good point, Mary. Thank you for it. Thank you also to Ian, who says, "Morning, Peter. Labour have invented a group, shall we call Starmer deniers." Barry says, "Morning, Peter. Labour are the enemies of the patriotic citizens of this nation." Mick says, "Matthew Laza is a decent, honest man. Can you ask him if he agrees with Starmer's duplicity and blatant lies?" Do you agree with Starmer's duplicity?
Well, I don't think there has been duplicity and blatant lies, but I will say when I think the government's wrong, and I think the government is wrong, for example, on these tests on young people. But thank you for the comment.
Okay, well, we're going to come back to the Matthews. Who decided to have two people called Matthew on the same debate desk? That was Chris, the producer. Well done, Chris. Why is Labour not making our borders safe? Let us know your thoughts, just as Mary did. 0344 499 1000. We'll come back to this story and plenty of others to talk to the Matthews about in just a minute here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Chrissy, thank you for your message. She has sent me a text, 87222. This is really scary at the moment. I'm afraid for our children in the future because if these illegal immigrants are allowed to vote in the next general election. We have no hope for the future of Britain. Thank you to this person also on text who says Labour will bring in digital ID and issue them to legal migrants pretending that it will make them easier to track, but they will do it to give them unrestricted access to the UK. The Cards and government need to pull French fishing licences until the boats are stopped. Penny in Essex says, Ben Habib has said it all. None of the governments care a jot about their own. Us, migrants, are treated better than UK citizens. It's all been said before. We constantly give foreign aid to many other countries, yet take our winter fuel payments away from people here. People freeze in their own homes. Our borders are just there for all and sundry to be welcomed in. We have no control. Migrants are welcomed. UK citizens can just get on with it. Hard luck. I despair of this country and what governments are doing to us. If only we had Trump, who loves this country. My blood pressure has risen, says Penny in Essex. And that's how a lot of people feel, Matthew Goodwin-Freeman.
People are angry. People are angry and fed up. A government was elected with a humongous majority and promised change, and now we're not seeing change. We're seeing change for the worse, not the better. Like, people are fed up, and I completely get it. And from my point of view as an outsider, from someone who, you know, on a local level with government, we just carry on with our same old. But people look at their bills going up. People look at their local areas getting worse. People look at winter fuel payment being taken away, a small, tiny fraction of the government's books, and then we see billions and billions being handed out elsewhere. I completely get it. And the contrast, we see the UK in decline, and the US are so optimistic. I mean, the presidential inauguration, so optimistic about the next 4 years of Trump and America back again. So, yeah, I completely
well,
get it.
let's talk about that, because Starmer's Brexit reset, we are told, risk damaging a trade war with Trump. He's been warned that cozying up to the European Union risks dragging Britain into a damaging tariff war with Donald Trump. We've heard about China, we've heard about Canada and Mexico. Matthew Laza, what do you make of this from Starmer's perspective?
Yeah, look, I mean, it is an incredibly difficult tightrope that Britain, never mind whoever's in charge, has to walk, actually, frankly, on everything all the time between the US and Europe, whether we're in the EU or whether we're not. I think what's really important, though, is the Tories need to realise that they need to stand up for the British interest and not become echo chambers or spokespeople for President Trump, because, you know, frankly, what President Trump is doing in terms of tariffs is crazy. Not only do I think that, but the vast majority of the American people
it's worked in regard to Colombia, for example.
It worked in regard to Colombia, but it hasn't. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's not sure it's going to work.
Well, it's early days.
Canada.
It's early days.
Absolutely, but look, 70% of the American people are against threatening allies like Britain and Canada with tariffs. So I think the fact that, you know, the Tories don't want to be becoming the spokesperson for what is a foreign power, they need to stand up for the national interest.
So what are Labour going to do?
Well,
because you're in government now.
Yes, absolutely. And what Labour are going to do is stand up for the national interest and not just kowtow and doff our cap and tug our forelocks to Donald Trump.
But doesn't getting closer to the EU actually make things more difficult for the UK as an independent nation?
First of all, we do get significantly more trade with the EU than we do with the US. But secondly, if he does impose tariffs on us and Europe, we clearly need to work together with Europe on our response.
Why not work with the Americans on the response?
Absolutely, of course we should work with the Americans on issues and we do, and we will work with the Americans. There's no lessening of the relationship with America. Donald Trump's politics are not my politics or Keir Starmer's politics, but that doesn't mean that we won't continue to work very, very closely with the US. So, I mean, and frankly, I think on the Chagos Islands, I think probably the Chagos issue is dead, which will gain credit in Washington. So it's not a case of hostility to Donald Trump, but it's a case from the Tories of hostility to Britain and trying to play politics by backing their mate across the Atlantic rather than backing the national interest.
We'll be speaking to the Shadow Business Secretary Andrew Griffith in just a few minutes' time, and we'll get his view on all of this. In the meantime, the Matthews are with us on the debate desk. Let me just read out. Oh, you don't like being called the Matthews.
Oh, it is brilliant. We need a jingle.
You do need a jingle. A sting. I will read a few more messages because people are really, really annoyed about this. Tim says it's not incompetence, but Keir's deliberate ideological desire to form part of the grand wicked plan. Wake up. Dawn in Chelmsford says we are now on a downward spiral with a clearly incompetent government. Net zero and illegal immigration is going to destroy us. Our economy is in trouble and we are facing huge council tax increases. Who voted for this? Says Dawn. Simon in Cardiff. So Sir Keith said in his pointless statement, after Southport sentencing that his government's #1 priority was protecting children in the UK. How is he doing that by removing age-determining testing on illegal migrants? Absolutely ludicrous, says Simon in Cardiff. Completely agree with you, Simon. Jane says the boats were never going to be stopped by both parties. Look at the long-term contracts given out, many making a profit. It's big business and people are making a fortune. Your reaction to those thoughts?
Well, interesting. I mean, the point that came out with me was who voted for this. That, like, genuinely for me, that is the thing that I've gone on since July the 4th. Who voted for this? Pretty much everything that was in the Labour Party manifesto, gone, like not there anymore. Tons of things that weren't in the Labour Party manifesto suddenly brought in because they've got this giant majority and can do what they want. Like, it is for the sake of all of us that we have a good, strong government that gets on and delivers for everybody, and we aren't seeing that, and that's why people are so disenfranchised right now.
Well, they might say they're strong because they're doing what they want to do because they have a huge majority.
What they want, not what the British public want.
Matthew?
I totally disagree. I think the government is getting on with implementing the manifesto.
There are a lot of things that have come up. Obviously, things do come up. Yes. Things do come up. Things do change. But in terms of what we were told it was all fully costed, and we've had taxes go up to a huge degree as well.
We have the black hole things.
The fake black hole that you can't point to.
Well, things like the fact that your government shamefully, absolutely disgracefully pushed.
Answer the question. Don't deflect.
Hold on.
The question.
Is pushed the infected blood scandal, for example, which is billions and billions of pounds. Not a penny was put aside for it. We've seen the issues with the hospitals. Boris boasted and boosted that he was going to build all these hospitals, and the money for half of them was never there. So we've had to clean up.
Were on track by 2030.
We've had to clean up the mess. And frankly, the government isn't popular. It has made some mistakes along the way, but its instincts are in the right place, and it's actually getting on with tackling the problems rather than appearing in Downing Street with a 3-word slogan: "Stop the boats," and the boats kept coming.
Cleaning up the problems by taxing everybody, cutting our pensioners' winter fuel payments, and just lying. Yeah, absolutely. That's Labour.
Well, what I'd like to know is what the Tories would cut. So if you don't want the tax rises, what would you cut? You'd cut the National Health Service, you'd cut education, you'd cut border security, and you'd cut the extra police officers.
We aren't the government. The fact is that we aren't the government, and it is your responsibility now as the Labour government to get on and deliver, and instead you are lying to the British public and lying from day one.
The Tories are not exactly popular either.
Absolutely.
You know, they're losing out to the third after Labour and Reform in many polls.
Absolutely, and we have to rebuild, and we have to completely come together again. And the point is, we are no longer the government. So as long as Labour want to point to 14 years and 14 years, fact is they are now the government. We will go away. We will rebuild. We will come back together with a manifesto at the next general election. But the point, we're going to be sorting out your mess, I think it is. But the point is that, frankly, it doesn't matter now for the Conservative Party and what they want to do. We aren't the government. We can't enforce it. You are.
Well, we're going to talk to the Shadow Business Secretary, Andrew Griffith, in a few minutes' time. Let me just read out a couple more messages. Lots of people getting in touch. Penny says, I don't know one person who couldn't stop these boats. I've had to read that twice regarding citizenship to migrants, making it easier for them. Total madness. Is this for the Labour vote? Can you imagine Trump allowing this? He's sending them back post-haste. Utter disbelief reading that. Also, our culture will change. What is going on? Maggie in London says, in my opinion, Labour are watering down the immigration laws. It's because they see the rise of reform. We need a strong leader like President Trump. Paul in Hartlepool, your contributor is wrong. There is a magic wand coupled with lines of buoys at 12-mile limit, the Royal Navy and other agencies. You simply turn the boats back. This is a problem with just Australia solved. Trump will solve the problem, and so can we. Only reform will deal with this problem. The streets of the North East are lawless due to being overwhelmed with migrants, says Paul in Hartlepool. Dave in Swansea, the relaxation of the laws to grant citizenship to illegals reminds me of the old Monty Python sketch where they were interviewed for the Secret Service. The interviewer asked the candidate if he could keep a secret. When he said yes, they said, well, you've got the job then. Sarah near Plymouth says, do you know if anybody has ever left the UK by claiming asylum elsewhere? And Mick says, why should Trump and the American people favour bad allies like the UK, EU and Canada, says Mick. Well, we're going to talk to Andrew Griffith, the Shadow Business Secretary. In just a few minutes, we'll get his response. Then we'll go back to the debate desk and the Matthews in terms of what they think. Stay with us here on Talk.
is because it's being run by people who think that the DEI business is a good idea. That, you know, let's all be terribly inclusive. Let's get more dwarfs. Let's get more intellectually challenged people. And I think he was saying that in January, the Biden administration actually ordered people with severe mental disability to be given jobs controlling aircraft. It's completely bonkers.
Yeah, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, that is actually insane.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just been looking at some tweets there during the break. The government has lost control of its borders. It's given up control, says Lioness. They have chosen to turn its head away. This is not an accident. Wendy says Jackie from Oldham was spot on and so knowledgeable. Agree with that. Ronnie says stop providing taxpayers funding to charities and lawyers who fight for illegal immigrants to remain in our country for reasons of legal loopholes, says Ronnie. How come you don't mention Wales, says Di? Well, do you know what? We do mention Wales quite a lot, actually, although I haven't this morning, and that's a fair point, Di. Wales is the worst performing of the home nations in every single department. The language is at the bottom in health, education, wages, taxes, child poverty, and this after 26 years of Labour. If Labour was the answer, Wales would be a shining beacon of prosperity and services, not at the bottom of every comparable stat. So your far left extreme tendencies clouding your imagination of what the problem actually is. The Tories were rubbish, but UK Labour take this to a whole new level, says Di, who's not happy. Another person who I think wants to perhaps disagree with what's going on is Kevin in Basingstoke. Kevin, you've given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say, not just to me, but also to Matthew Laza and Matthew Goodwin Freeman? You're very welcome to the programme.
What is Keir Starmer supposed to protect us from? I think our borders are safe, aren't they?
You think our borders are safe? Okay. Well, what about the tens of thousands of illegal migrants coming over? We don't know where they're coming from. We don't know who they are. We don't know what their intentions are.
They're not illegal. They have the right to come here and claim asylum. So where's the? I
mean, they're arriving illegally, and they have the right to.
If they were illegal, they'd be in prison, wouldn't they? If they came over and punched the policeman, they'd be in trouble for it because that's illegal.
Well, they're not arriving.
They're not doing anything illegal. That's why they're not put in prison.
Well, they are arriving illegally. That is happening, and they are breaking the law by doing so. But Kevin, I mean, why do you? Let me probe the issue that you're talking about in terms of why you think our borders are in fact safe when there's a lot of evidence, I think, to say that they are being penetrated very, very frequently and very rapidly.
Well, no, you're trying to say they're doing something illegal. And my point is, we're a member of the Refugee Convention. So people can come here and claim asylum. If you're in Afghanistan and you haven't got a passport, you go down the post office and get all your paperwork sorted out.
There are people who come here to claim asylum, but there are others, there are at least a quarter of those people who arrive, who are not legitimate asylum seekers.
Well, no, but they're only illegal. Just as their claims, they're right.
Yeah.
And they're only illegal if they abscond. Up until then, they're not illegal.
Well, they are. They're arriving illegally. They're arriving in a non-legal way. Matthew Goodwin Freeman.
Yeah, this was one of the things that the Conservative government introduced. If you come here through a non-legal way, that is therefore illegal. So they are illegal migrants. But one of the questions I would have is, I actually agree and disagree. I think people who come here like illegal migrants on the boats should have been put in prison. That would have been a deterrent. And then we'd run out of prison spaces, so build more prisons, but that would have been a deterrent and that would have stopped people coming over. But I'm sorry, they are coming over illegally. There are safe and legal passages that people can come through and claim asylum that way, not on a rubber dinghy, risking their life and others across one of the busiest channels in the world.
Kevin, I'll come back to you in a second, but I just want to get Matthew Laza's perspective on this.
Yeah, look, I mean, I disagree with Kevin to the extent that I think that they are clearly people are arriving illegally, even if they have a genuine asylum case. And of course, to arrive here on the Channel, they have to have passed through a number of safe countries where, frankly, they should have applied for asylum in the first place. And indeed, that's why I think that we should have offshore processing before we would even get into Europe to do that. But we must remember that as a country, we have a fine tradition of providing asylum to those who need it. The system isn't working, but asylum as a concept is, of course, one we should all remember.
Kevin, France is a safe country. Why do you think people should come across from France if it is a safe country and you can claim asylum there?
They don't have to claim asylum in the first safe country. They can claim asylum.
But should they?
They have to.
They do under the Dublin Convention.
They do under the Dublin Convention, and shouldn't they have to?
Well, not if that's not the law. They can have to do something which is not, they're not breaking the law, so why should they have to do something that the law doesn't say they should?
Okay, it is factually breaking the law, I'm afraid, Kevin. It is. They are here illegally. That is just a fact. But Kevin, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts on that. Stuart has been in touch and says, "Good morning, Peter. Can you ask Matthew, the Labour one, does he realise just how disliked this Labour government is by the vast majority of British people? Yeah. Do you even care?"
Oh, of course. Look, I mean, I don't think anybody in the Labour Party is happy with the current opinion poll ratings, which around 25. The government was elected on 30-something. Clearly, the government's got a job of work to be doing to assure people that it's heading in the right direction. But I think there's time, and I think the fundamentals are being put in place. But of course, nobody revels in a lack of support. Most polls, Labour is still at the top, and the Tories and Reform fight it out. But that's not good enough. Labour needs to regain people who have lost, including people it's lost to Reform.
We're going to talk to Andrew Griffith, the Shadow Business Secretary, in just a second. Let me read out a couple more messages. Doug says, by easing up on asylum, Cooper and Starmer are complicit with the people traffickers. Why have they not been arrested? Terry and Slough says, Peter, I'm 75. I wouldn't trust this Labour government to run a raffle. Never mind this great country of ours. The Tories are absolutely useless. Only Reform will put the British people first. Graham from Telford says, hi Peter, 6 million on the NHS waiting list, 7 million migrants. I reckon we could sort the NHS, no problem. Right then, let's talk to the Shadow Business Secretary, Andrew Griffith from the Conservatives. Andrew, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good to be with you.
Andrew, the thing that I think I can safely say our viewers and listeners are most concerned about is this plan by Keir Starmer to ease the rules for illegal migrants, specifically on citizen applications to be allowed and scientific age testing to be scrapped. That's something the Conservatives introduced. Tell us your concerns around this.
Well, it's a real concern. Obviously, as you know, the government came to office saying they'd got a plan. It turned out they hadn't. The level of illegal migration, the small boats arrivals, is up by 30% like for like. And the Borders Bill that they presented last week to government, in some cases, is an act of unilateral disarmament. It removes the issue around visa sanctions, whereby the UK can sanction a country that doesn't take back those who are failed, whose claims are failed here. And then there's this very particular, it's quite technical, but a particular concern about removing scientific and medical assessments of age, so that, as we know, the regime for children is softer than one for adults. So many adult male asylum seekers falsely claim to be younger than they are. If they're successful in that, they can end up in settings where there are, for example, young female teenagers. And so we put in place a very sensible set of measures to make sure that that testing was mandatory, was carried out. Labour then declined to do so, and now they're removing that provision from the law.
Andrew, it's interesting because they just seem, certainly with the polling anyway, that people don't believe your party has a plan, that Kemi Badenoch has a plan. You're third in some polls after Reform and Labour. Also, a flagship policy that you implemented, of course, Brexit, 5 years to the day since then. Quite a number of people saying that they believe there should be a closer tie to the EU, perhaps even thinking that Brexit isn't working. What's your reaction to those numbers?
Well, look, I don't comment on polls. I make that a rule. But to people who are disappointed about Brexit, I would say, look, those freedoms are enduring. we have got back the ability to make our own laws. There are many domains in which we made good use of those even in the time that we had. For example, in financial services, where as City Minister I took through a very substantial amounts of deregulation and derogations from laws that had been made by the EU that never fitted the circumstances of the United Kingdom. There's other areas I can understand people's frustration that we in office didn't go faster when we had the opportunity, and the whole point of being in opposition now is to take the time and to make sure we've got only credible plans to put in front of people at the next election. That will take time. I don't have them all with me this morning, and you probably wouldn't expect that, because they wouldn't be credible unless we've taken the time to go through and make sure that they are.
How long is it going to take you, Andrew? Because Kemi Badenoch is nearly 100 days into her time as leader of the Conservative Party. There's not much coming from her in terms of what she would do differently to the Labour government.
Look, foundations need to be built first, and then we can build some firm plans on the top of those. We've got to be and demonstrate a competent opposition, and I believe we are doing that, but it'll take time for people to see that. I was out all last week, in fact I'm out every week, talking about this government's failure on the economy, the lack of growth, the real damage that they're doing to businesses and wealth creators, the fact that nearly 11,000 millionaires paying more than the average amount of tax left this country over the last 12 months. So I think it'll take time, Peter, to do that and do it in a credible way. And I think that's right. I think if suddenly, after the biggest ever defeat last July, everyone picked themselves up and somehow 6 months later said, we've worked it all out, I think you'd quite rightly be saying, come off it. That's not credible. You know, we want to hear more from you, but you've got to rebuild.
Tell me what you think about what Donald Trump is doing in regard to his tariffs on Mexico and Canada, talking about China as well. Are you worried the UK could become a victim of this as Shadow Business Secretary?
Well, I'm worried about the UK becoming collateral damage. That would particularly be true if we threw our lot in with the EU, if we didn't have independent control on trade. I worry anyway that with things like the disastrous Chagos Islands sellout, some of the things that this government has said in the past, and their general lack of engagement with the US administration so far, I do worry that, you know, despite the very good will that I hear towards the UK from my friends in Washington, that we could still end up the wrong side of that. And look, as a free trader, and the UK depends on free trade, I worry generally about a world in which there are tariffs and counter tariffs, but the best way we can try and influence that is to be in the room. And regrettably, the rooms that the Prime Minister seems to want to be in are all in Brussels, not in Washington.
Tell me what you think about Elon Musk, because he has called the Liberal Democrat leader a snivelling cretin. Is Ed Davey a snivelling cretin?
Well, he's a very wise man on many things. I probably shouldn't comment on those individual words. I certainly think it's the wrong thing to go back into the European Union. I've never found it an exceptional idea that democracy, a proud democracy like the United Kingdom, should make its laws in Parliament and shouldn't have those laws made by the European Commission that's reflecting a very different sort of economy or fact pattern to the one we have in the UK. So, you know, I think whether you like the government of the day or not, at least you have the ability to kick them out. And at least that government and that parliament has the ability to make laws. So many of the problems in our society today are not stemming from democracy per se. They're either from lawyers and arm's length unaccountable quangos or from supranational bodies.
Andrew, thank you. That's Andrew Griffith there, who is the Shadow Business Secretary, speaking to us from central London. Let me know your thoughts on what he has said, and indeed the question we're asking this morning about why Labour is not making our borders safe. 0344 499 1000, that is the number to call. You can comment on anything that Andrew Griffith said there as well. We've got Matthew Goodwin-Freeman and indeed Matthew Lazar primed like a coiled spring to react to what Andrew Griffith has said there as well. I want your reaction as well. 0344 499 1000. Plenty to come after the news here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. I'm here between now and 1 o'clock. There's loads to talk about. We've got Matthew Goodwin-Freeman and indeed Matthew Laza still with us on the debate desk because we heard from Andrew Griffith, the business secretary, just a minute ago. What did you make of what he said, not just about the EU, but also about migration? We're asking the question this morning, why is Labour not making our borders safe? Lots of people getting in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the main number to give us a ring on. We're also talking in about 20 minutes time to someone who was basically, not quite, but basically diagnosed with motor neurone disease. He had a really rough time. He wanted to end his own life. This whole debate about assisted dying is something that we need to keep talking about, and Peter Sefton-Williams is going to be in the studio telling us about that and how he had planned to take his own life, planned to go to Dignitas in Switzerland, and then realised actually things weren't as bad as he thought they were. 0344 499 1000 for your thoughts on that as well. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. Tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note. We've had some of those this morning. We'll have some more between now and 1 o'clock. You can send me a voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or indeed give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Stay with me here on Talk. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Well, let's get a reaction to what Andrew Griffith was saying, because on the debate desk, Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, who is political commentator and Conservative councillor, and Matthew Laza, former Labour advisor. Matthew Laza, maybe we'll start with you first on what Andrew Griffith was saying there.
Yeah, well, I think I'm afraid that he fulfilled my prophecy, that he seems to be a spokesperson for the American radical right. I mean, let's just take one tiny example in that interview. When you asked Andrew Griffith about Elon Musk's comments about Lib Dem leader Ed Davey, when apparently he's called him a snivelling cretin. I think a simple no would have done. I mean, we've seen today calls from the Princess of Wales for a more civilised, debate and compassionate country. I think if one of your fellow politicians is called a silly name by a foreign bully boy,
maybe he thinks he is a snivelling cretin.
Well, then he should have said yes, but instead he just said, I'm not. Elon Musk's a wise man, but I'm not going to comment on this. I think we need a better politics than that, and I think that's an example of how the Tories need to be so careful that in their panic at being pushed into third place by reform, they don't try and be reform light. Because that's actually not going to work for anybody.
Reform light, Matthew Goodwin-Freeman?
Well, that was a perfect example of how to just avoid answering the question about the entire interview and focus on one little thing to grab a headline. I mean, let's talk about the whole interview. You asked him about the illegal migrants. He said very clearly Labour were elected and said that they had a plan. They don't. They said they'll smash the gangs, and all we've had is words, words, words. Illegal crossings are up 52%. So that was that part of the interview. Absolutely, he held his hands up and said it's too soon for the Conservatives to be trusted. We are the opposition. We've got to go away, build our foundations, get credible plans and hold Labour to account and do our job as the opposition. That's what I've said. Frankly, it doesn't matter what the Conservative Party say anymore. We're not in charge. Labour are.
I love how you're ticking these off.
Yeah, no, because I'm actually, unlike other politicians, I'm actually going to answer your question. He talked about Labour's 6 months in government, the economy down, growth down, taxes up and winter fuel payments cut. And then the big point that I really liked was talking about the Chagos Island... the 1,000 millionaires have left the country.
It's good to know the Tories
that's good how we can't...
1,000
millionaires, that's money...
In fairness, Labour are actually easing the rules that they put in the budget. They're doing a U-turn on non-doms, are they not?
Well, non-dom tax is gone.
They reviewed them and they're putting in a sensible. The fact is,
they told us over and over again before the election that the non-dom taxation was going to pay for everything. That just wasn't the case.
We didn't say it was going to pay for everything.
We said it was going to pay for a lot of things.
Everything, it was the non-dom tax.
But that just wasn't true, Matthew, was it?
It has paid for certain things. They've adjusted it because to get it right, and it's still a tougher regime on non-doms than the Tories put in place. And remember, the Tories wouldn't put any tougher restrictions on non-doms until we had huge pressure from the Labour Party when we were in opposition. It's just not credible to say it doesn't matter what the Tories say. The reason people are going to reform is, whether you like it or not, what Nigel Farage says. He makes clear what he thinks the future of the country should be. All Calamity Kemi can do is just sort of say, the Tory party's under new leadership. Yes, under new leadership is doing so well, they're now third in the polls, and they're going to get hammered in the local elections in May.
If those local elections even take place, because obviously Labour have cancelled so many around
what
the
Labour
country.
have done is where we're doing less government reform. We're doing exactly the same thing.
Redraw the entire map. loads of local councils that currently exist won't exist in 12 months' time. That's taking away elections from people.
Just exactly the same thing happened. I mean, this is ridiculous.
In COVID?
No, not in COVID.
With the 12 months where they would happen?
Let me finish, please. So, if you live in Cumbria, and I'm sure we've got people listening in Cumbria, exactly the same thing happened when Cumbria County Council was abolished under the Tories and went to unitary authorities. Everybody was extended by a year while the new thing, and then there were elections for the new bodies. It's exactly what all parties do. Don't make a fuss out of something that isn't around.
I want to ask you about Labour facing potential investigation over indirect funding from the EU when it was in opposition. This is the Electoral Commission, which regulates party financing in the UK, says it's looking into a donation to an affiliated Labour organisation as a potential regulatory concern. Now, there is no doubt that basically all parties, certainly the Conservative Party, has had many problems with donations and dodgy donations previously, but this is the Labour Party, the EU sanctioned the FEPS, the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, for making a £30,000 donation in 2023, calling it indirect funding for the UK Labour Party. Matthew?
Yeah, so, I mean, this, for me, if I look at the whole thing, we're seeing Labour being investigated now because the FEPS, as you said, have actually been fined by the EU's watchdog because of the indirect funding of UK Labour Party. Political foundations with EU funding are prohibited from donating to any party's electioneering funds. So what's happened is they've broken the rules, and now they're looking at whether or not the Labour Party have broken any rules by accepting the donation and how that money was spent. What I point out, though, is the hypocrisy in this, because all we've heard for the last couple of weeks is how it would be dreadful if Elon Musk invests money into reform and donates money into foreign donations, and then suddenly you get foreign donations into the Labour Party.
Hang on, Matt, you need to be very careful here, because nobody is saying there's been a donation to the Labour Party. The Fabian Society is an independent organisation. It's a think tank. It publishes pamphlets. It has nothing to do with the Labour Party's election machine.
That's why it's being investigated.
Actually, I know about the Federation of European Policy Studies. I've worked with them before. The reason it's been fined is partly because we are no longer in the EU, and it's always been controversial about whether they can do anything in Britain now. But now Britain is not in the EU. What it is it's the think tank arm of the centre-left group in the European Parliament. So it gets funded through the European Parliament, and every one of them, including when Nigel was there, they set up one. In the UKIP group at the time, etc. So this is a question about whether or not Labour has not accepted a penny from the Federation of European Policy Studies. The Fabian Society, who had a conference last weekend at which people speak, and they get people who aren't Labour people to speak at it as well. It's I think older than the Labour Party.
Just don't ask me to speak. I'd love to speak at a Fabian.
I will get you a slot.
I'd love
to. But it's not about knocking on doors. It's not about European money for the leaflets to go through your door.
All right, let's speak to Chris in Epsom, who's given me a ring, 03444991000. Chris, you're on with me, but also Matthew Laza and indeed Matthew Goodwin-Freeman. What would you like to say this morning?
First of all, nice to see you back and fit, Peter.
Thank you. Very kind.
Now I'd like to take both the Matthews to task.
Excellent.
Go for it. We'll start with Matthew Laza, perhaps.
Matthew Laza is a lying apologist. He forgets what was promised before the election. Every single promise has been broken. Starmer sat in front of the Farmers Union and said, I will not change the taxes. He was there for an hour. Also, if you play back just before that in Parliament, he stood there saying there was a £40 million black hole, which they costed and developed their plan around fixing the black hole budget. All right? Then they get in and everything's blamed on the £22 billion black hole, 18 billion less than they thought it was, and they still don't keep one single promise. The other Matthew...
Hold on a second. Let's do one Matthew at a time. Chris, stay where you are just for a second. Let's get Matthew Laza to respond to that. Then we can talk to Matthew Goodwin-Freeman. Matthew Laza.
Look, I don't defend everything the government does. I think that on farmers, I think there is a case for the biggest landowners in Britain paying a tax. I think it needs. I would have done it slightly differently, and I think that they gave the wrong messages to the farming community because they didn't phrase it so people can feel that they were betrayed on that. And just as on the WASPy women, Labour never promised under Starmer it would give the WASPy women the money, but what it did is too many Labour MPs held up signs. Too many MPs of all parties did that. I wouldn't personally have done that. So I hope that, although I will defend the government where I think it's right, I think the government has made some mistakes.
Okay, Chris, go for the other Matthew now, Matthew Goodwin-Freeman.
Well, Matthew Laza is indefensible and shouldn't be listened to on anything. Now, the other Matthew, right? very, very good with his facts and figures and everything, but he forgets it was his party, a party that my 3 generations of my family have supported. Yeah. All right, and my grandfather was asked many times to stand as an MP. He had a photographic memory. He used to read Hansard every day, and his favourite sport was to go and tear apart Labour MPs at their meetings. Now, he forgets they let 1 million people in.
Yep.
Right? Now, just one example came from the ex-border control officer, that 3 Nigerian women turned up with their visas, okay? But each of those women had a husband, and each of those women had 3 children.
Yeah.
All right? That's 12 people drawing on resources for 3 people to work in healthcare.
Yep.
And Chris makes a reasonable point, doesn't he?
A net benefit.
But Chris makes a reasonable point, doesn't he, that he believes that the Conservatives failed on immigration.
Yeah, and Chris, you're absolutely right, and that's why we're not in government anymore. We absolutely failed. And you're completely right. I think, from my own personal opinion as a political commentator, I think we focus so much on illegal migrants, on the boats coming across the channel, which is a very small percentage, but is the whole figurehead and the flagship of we don't have a protection on our borders, that we completely lost the eye on legal migration, which you're completely right. 3 people come over, then they each bring a husband, they each bring 2 kids, and suddenly you're up more. I think you're completely right, and we absolutely messed up on that.
Chris,
and I can only, it's not my job to apologise. I'm not an MP, but I apologise absolutely.
Chris, Matthew Goodwin Freeman has basically said, look, we screwed up on that. Could the Tories ever get your trust back, Chris?
Yeah, I'd like to know that.
At this moment in time, no. Yeah. I'm a paid-up member of Reform.
Okay.
What I would say is that everybody is missing the point on Starmer as well. David Starkey explains Starmer's actions and his thought plan. He is a human rights lawyer with an international globalist view. And that is what is coming through with everything that he's doing. It's not that he hates the British people, it's just that he loves the idea of internationalism.
Okay.
And globalist.
Chris, thanks for your thoughts this morning. Really appreciate them. That's Chris and Epsom there. Peter in Croydon, 03444991000. Peter, you're on with me, and also Matthew Laza and Matthew Goodwin Freeman. What would you like to say?
Yeah, morning, Peter.
Morning.
Yeah. I listened to what's the name? Cooper's Yvette Cooper.
Yvette Cooper, yeah.
Yeah, Yvette Cooper's full interview. I mean, that woman to me is hopeless, and I hope maybe Matthew Zara can counter the argument, but she's been in government for 28 years.
Well, she wasn't in government during the Tory time, obviously, but she's been around frontline politics for a very long time, yeah.
Exactly, she's been an MP, yeah.
Yeah, a long time, yeah.
Also 28 years, yeah.
But you don't think she's any good?
I don't think she's any good this morning. I mean, I know it's off topic, but she spoke about the AI in child abuse.
Yeah.
And she made out that she cares, it's wrong. But when it comes to these poor kids getting raped by the Muslim gangs, she ignores the issue. She doesn't want to do it.
Well, let's actually hear what Yvette Cooper had to say on that, Peter. She spoke to Sky News this morning on this specific issue about paedophiles using AI. Let's see what Yvette Cooper had to say on this.
What's now happening is that AI is putting this on steroids, and it is making it easier for perpetrators, for abusers to groom children, and it's also meaning that they are manipulating images of children and then using them to draw and to blackmail young people into further abuse. It's just the most vile of crimes. So what we need to do is to strengthen the law, and that includes banning some of the sort of AI models being used for child abuse, but also banning some of the paedophile manuals.
Well, thank you to Peter for his point. Matthew Laza on that particular point of AI, very, very worrying. Do you think Yvette Cooper's up for the fight here? Because I mean, she's under some pressure. Some people briefing against her today, and some of the papers, including the Mail on Sunday.
Yeah, I think. Look, I think that Yvette is a very experienced minister, as we were just hearing from Peter. She has been an MP for 28 years. I think that there is some anger in Number 10 about the grooming gangs response, which seemed to say no to all inquiries, wasn't put on apparently on Number 10's radar, and then there was a bit of a sort of it sort of wasn't exactly a U-turn, but a sort of the policy was decided upon. So I think that the Number 10 will be expecting Yvette to sharpen up her performance, and that's why I think you've seen her coming out on the front foot today. With her and Jess Phillips on the AI paedophiles issue.
Final word from Matthew Goodwin-Freeman.
Yeah, no, I think this government is really... They've taken Christmas and taken the time to reflect on how things are going, and I hope that they come into 2025 with a clear policies and agenda and get on with this and change and let's get going and let's get the country going up again. Whether or not we see it, I don't think so, but I think Keir Starmer's days are numbered. I think he can't recover from this no matter what.
Just one little point for Matthew Laza. Leslie's been in touch. Says, a bit rich for you, Matthew Laza, to talk about what Elon Musk said about Davy, about insulting words from Musk, and then call her Calamity Kemi.
Maybe I stand...
well done.
Okay. Cool.
Will you apologise now, Minister? Will you apologise, Minister?
There we are. There we are. As long as we don't call him Lazy Laza.
You won't get me that then.
Or not so good when Freeman.
There we go. That's good.
Yeah. Listen. Both of you, thank you very much. Thanks for staying on a little bit longer as well because of the Andrew Griffith interview. Appreciate that. Matthew Laza, former Labour advisor, Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, political commentator and Conservative councillor. Plenty of interesting points from them. Be sure to respond to them. 0344 499 1000. In just a second, we're going to talk to a retired journalist, a man called Peter Williams. This is a really interesting story because doctors got it wrong. He would have killed himself. He would have taken his own life had he had what the doctor said been right about him potentially having motor neuron disease. It's a fascinating story. It feeds into the big debate we're having. I want to hear from you as well on assisted dying and assisted suicide. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
One of his executive actions was to remove DEI from selection criteria in the federal aviation, specifically for air traffic controllers. Yeah. And during the Obama years, there were 1,000 candidates. And out of the 1,000, 900 ended up doing a class action lawsuit that were removed from their candidacy because there wasn't, in terms of the administration's view, enough diversity.
Right.
And it's something in public safety like that. It's really important to keep that away.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has got in touch this morning. There's clearly a lot to debate. 0344 499 1000 is the number for calls, and we'll certainly take plenty more calls between now and 1 o'clock. But I just want to pause now slightly to talk about something slightly different from the immigration debate. It's a fascinating tale from Peter Williams, who joins me in the studio today. He's a former journalist and marketing manager. And Peter, really, I was reading about your story. It very much comes into the big argument that so many people are having at the moment about assisted dying. Can you just tell us what happened to you? Actually, not that long ago, really just over a year ago, because your life changed dramatically, didn't it?
It did. About just over a year ago, I noticed twitching, very severe twitching in my hands, and my muscles were wasting in my right hand, and I was losing strength. And I went to, in fact, a private GP who said, well, you better go to a neurologist and have it diagnosed. And throughout January of the last year, I had a whole barrage of tests. And on the 29th of January, I went in to see the specialist. And he said, well, it can only be one thing. You've got motor neuron disease. Now, I'm not a medical person, but I know that motor neuron disease is really one of the most fearsome things that you can die of. You can't swallow, you can't breathe, you can't move, you can't speak towards the end.
So immediately, I suppose, you were seeing a very, very bleak future.
Very bleak. Well, no future. He said it's inevitably terminal. There is a Rilutech, a medicine which slows it down very slightly, but it's marginal. He prescribed that for me, and said that death usually came between 1.5 and 4 years or so after diagnosis. However, he said it can very often come quite quickly. And he told me that I should make no plans whatsoever beyond 6 months.
Wow.
And that, you know...
So what was your plan then? Just because that of course, will have had a profound psychological impact on you as well.
It did. I panicked. And I thought, I can't cope. I live on my own. And I simply can't cope with this. So the next day, I signed up with Dignitas in Switzerland, with a view that they said that you needed 6 months or so to do the paperwork for Dignitas, and I thought, well, maybe I've only got 6 months to live, so if I'm going to sign up with them, I better sign up immediately.
That was very rapid, and that was a dramatic decision to make.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was quite a quick decision. Was it so very clear in your mind that now you got this diagnosis, that's what you had to do, or you wanted to do?
The doctor said that he was going to write down that I had suspected motor neuron disease, but he told me face to face that there was absolutely no doubt that that's what I had, and I should plan on that basis, and so they were my plans. What he then did, he said, we can obviously go for a second opinion, and you will need a great deal of care. So he sent me to a very large London teaching hospital, and one of the senior specialists in the country saw me, and I didn't see that person until the very beginning of April, and he did some tests and totally confirmed that I had motor neuron disease. There was no doubt whatsoever. And he sent me to various other specialists, breathing specialists, a specialist nurse who would give me advice, a palliative care doctor to talk about my end-of-life care.
So very rapidly, these huge and dramatic things were happening, but there was a major problem with the diagnosis, wasn't there?
What happened, I was expecting, obviously, to get worse very quickly, and I thought, I'll just go back a step.
Sure.
The specialist, the senior specialist, said that although I might have up to 5 years to live, it is possible that I could be dead within 2 months. And they pointed out that the wasting in my hands had been there for some time, so so I had already the disease quite a long time, they suspected. Anyway, what happened is I didn't get any worse. And as April, May, June, July, August went on, I couldn't understand it. I was getting no worse. I was having no trouble in any area. And then I even noticed that my right hand was getting a bit stronger.
So this is completely against what you'd been told was going to happen?
Completely and totally against. So going back and forth to the various specialists, they sent me for some more, I don't know the technical name, nerve conductivity tests. They stick a needle in and run an electric current through it. That was in end of October, I think. And the specialist there at the same teaching hospital said, no, this doesn't look like motor neuron disease at all.
Goodness me.
It looks like something called multifocal motor neuropathy, which is a mild condition. You certainly don't die of it.
And basically curable.
And
or can be treatable.
Treatable. It's an autoimmune condition. And the problem from the doctor's point of view, and if you look it up on the internet, it's a mimic disease of motor neuron disease. And in the early stages, it has very much the similar characteristics of motor neuron disease. But I finally got the diagnosis that it was multifocal motor neuropathy in November.
So it was nearly a year after the original diagnosis.
That's correct.
How did that, just tell us the psychological effect that had had, because you could have taken your own life. So already you'd sort of made those plans.
I had made those plans. What happened, I decided, after the initial shock and panic, I pulled myself together somewhat, and I switched instead to practical plans. I found a care home that dealt with people with motor neuron disease and went to see them, and they said they would accept me, and I decided which hospice I wanted to die in. And so I personally, I'm a practicing Catholic, and notwithstanding that, I did join Dignitas, but I then moved away from that because I felt, this was not the right thing to do, to kill myself. I was just going to have to go through it. But others would not have taken that view. They wouldn't have had my particular Christian faith, and they would, I presume, have said, well, two very eminent specialists have said, you've got motor neuron disease. You know how this ends, and there's a particular problem with motor neuron disease that you lose all your muscle strength. So you can't leave assisted suicide to the very end, because you don't have the muscle power to press the button. So it has to be some way before the end.
How do you feel towards those specialists? I mean, they're pretty eminent people who got it very wrong.
I think I don't want to blame them. I'm sure they were doing their best. The point, the main...
Others may not feel so generous, Peter.
Well, it seems to me there are two main lessons come out of this story. One is that doctors, however eminent, make mistakes. And in my case, it was an enormous mistake, which could have led to catastrophic consequences. And I see in the assisted dying bill, it says you need 2 doctors to sign. Well, I had 2 doctors.
You had 2 doctors, yeah.
Who had both confirmed what I had. And they had both said, one had said I should make no plans beyond 6 months. Another said that in the worst case, I could be dead within 2 months. So, and then it has to go to a judge. Well, I don't know would the judge have disagreed with them? If I had a settled intent to end my life, and the doctors had confirmed what I had, and everyone knows about motor neuron disease. I believe in Dignitas, it's for neurological diseases, it's the single biggest reason.
Yes, and you can see why, certainly.
And you can absolutely see why.
How do you feel about the assisted dying debate now? It's a very current, very live political debate. What do you make of that?
I'm very sympathetic to the very good people who are trying to help people who are suffering. And for those people who wish to kill themselves, I do understand that they wish to terminate their lives early. And I felt like that myself for a while. The problem comes when you look at the details of it, and how do you carry out? Who decides? At least when they said 2 doctors will certify that you have the disease, I suppose you might say, well, they might get the timing wrong. But who would have thought they actually get the disease wrong, which they did in my case, catastrophically, potentially. And so while I understand people who are proposing this, I think it's a very bad idea, and it would, in my case, I realised that the end-of-life care and the palliative care I was being offered was impressive. The NHS really came up trumps, and I was surrounded by specialists for those months, and I thought, well, I shall just have to go through with it.
How are you feeling now, Peter? What is your both physical and psychological state now?
Physically, I'm fine. The only problem, I have weakness in my right hand, and I hope that will recover. Psychologically, it's going to take, I think, it's been an immensely traumatic experience, and I feel I've been in front of a firing squad for 9 months or so, and it takes a while to regain your former composure and life. But time will sort that out, and I know I'll be fine.
And there are many MPs now and others who are having thoughts and big decisions to make about this assisted dying bill. What's your message to them?
What would my message be? Don't just focus on the principle of it, because we can all understand that. Focus on the details of it. Because the moment you get down to the detail, it becomes less and less possible. And I suppose the second thing would be focus on palliative care. And, I felt I would be looked after insofar as they can. There's nothing you can really do for motor neuron disease. But for a lot of people, the palliative care is not so great. And that would be a better area to focus on, I feel.
Peter, really fascinating speaking to you. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Really interesting real-world example there, and it humanises the debate to such a degree. So thank you for coming in. That's Peter Sefton-Williams there. He's a former journalist and marketing manager. Really fascinating story. I want to get your reaction to it as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We'll be talking as well to Brendan O'Neill in just a second. He's the chief political writer for Spiked in regard to what's been happening with the hostages in Israel and the hypocrisy from some around that. I should say, in regard to what Peter has been telling us about assisted dying, if you're affected by this story and you need help, we do have some helplines that we can direct you to. If you go on our website to talk.tv/helplines, there's plenty of information there. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody. I don't know about you, I found that a very moving, very interesting interview with Peter. I learned an awful lot from it, and thank you to everybody who's been in touch, including this person who says, never believe a word a GP or hospital doctor tells you. They are mostly incompetent and will end up making you worse and spouting nonsense about conditions you probably never had all the time. They'll be experimenting on you with drugs, leading to other complications. Well, I can honestly say, having had NHS treatment both by a GP and indeed in a very good hospital in London in the last few weeks, that I'm really pleased with how the NHS treated me when I had a rough time. Quite a few people know that I collapsed and I wasn't too well, but I can honestly say that the NHS treated me very, very well. And there are good examples as well as the bad examples as well. Thanks to Melindy, he says, really good show. I found the two Matthews very interesting. Good to hear a Labour guest who can back his position both articulately and politely. And this person on Twitter says the Conservative Party is a so-called broad church, but it doesn't have a religion. Right then, let's talk about Israel, because I am really interested. We've had quite a number of hostages that have been released over the last few days, which has been fantastic. We hope to speak to Aviva Siegel, who was a hostage herself. Her husband was a hostage, Keith. He was released yesterday, which is fantastic. But there's so much hypocrisy about this from so many on the left as well, and it's really, really interesting and very, very thoughtful article, typically thoughtful, by Brendan O'Neill, the chief political writer of Spiked. He actually wrote it in the Spectator. And there are so many different ways in which we've seen people being paraded through the baying mobs of Hamas terrorists and so on. And really the question, I suppose, is where are the women's rights organisations? Where are the Red Cross? Where are the compassionate people? And also the big issue of UNRWA as well, the UN Refugee Agency, where we know that some of those hostages have actually been held. Brendan O'Neill, as I say, is chief political writer of Spiked. Brendan, you're very welcome to the show. And there is a lot of hypocrisy around this, isn't there, especially from the left?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, those scenes we saw last week with Arbel Yahoud being released, really horrible scenes in Khan Yunis in Gaza. She was paraded through a mob of baying men. They were shouting religious slogans at her. They were shoving their mobile phones in her face. She looked absolutely terrified. She looked very small next to those huge Hamas fighters. It was really grotesque, and yet we've not heard a word from the so-called anti-racists of the West or the feminists of the West, you know, the kind of people who present themselves as progressives, who say they hate anti-Semitism, they hate racism, they hate misogyny, and yet here we had a grotesque spectacle of misogynistic racism, the parading of a small Jewish woman by a mob of anti-Semitic men, and they're not saying anything. I think the hypocrisy and the silence is really, really awful.
It is deafening, that silence. And I mean, we also have, you know, a few days after Holocaust Memorial Day, 80 years after the liberation of Auschwitz, and we have terrorists who are baying, who are I mean, I just found it so unseemly. It must be so terrifying as well, people taking selfies, baying, and being forced to hold up things like certificates and so on for learning Arabic and so on. I mean, it is just absolutely grotesque. And I do wonder as well about the other elements of this, the international organisations that are involved. The International Red Cross, which didn't seem to have any access to the hostages at any point but is bringing them back, that doesn't seem to have any fear of Hamas terrorists. And similarly, UNRWA, the UN Refugee Agency, and we have hostages who say that they were held at UNRWA facilities as well, Brendan.
It's shocking, but it's not surprising. That's the way I see it, especially in relation to UNRWA, because, you know, Emily Dabari, the British-Israeli young woman who was held captive for 450 days or thereabouts, she's now been released. Her mother says that she was held in UNRWA facilities. She was held in an UNRWA building. So we need to think about what this means. This means that the British government may have provided funds for an organisation that was helping to persecute
the other day, Brendan, they took 17 million off the maths budget in education, and on the same day, the UK government, headed by Keir Starmer, gave £17 million to UNRWA. That's what happened on the same day.
It's just extraordinary. And you'll remember when there was all the controversy about the funding of UNRWA and it was cut for a while, lots of leftists online started raising money for it. They started saying, we have to give money to this organisation. It's the Palestinians' best hope. And then the British government, when Labour got into power, they swiftly reinstalled the funding for UNRWA. You know, this is an organisation whose buildings were being used by an army of anti-Semites to hold a British Jew captive against her will. This is how serious this is. We now have a situation where our government and our so-called progressives were funding the facilities in which this young woman was held against her will, in which she was persecuted and punished essentially for being a Jewish woman. So, you know, do we now have a situation where the left in this country is helping to fund fascism? They're helping to fund.
Well, I worry it's not just the left. If it's every taxpayer, if it's you and me as well, and we have a government that just doesn't recognise that UNRWA, this organisation, this refugee agency, is so corrupt, is so riddled with Hamas terrorists, and is helping to hold those innocent Israelis. And also we have the conflagration on a number of occasions, including by many parts of the media, where you have Palestinian activists talking about Palestinian hostages. They're not hostages, they're prisoners, and trying to equivocate and try and say there's some equivalence between murderers and rapists and people who've bombed innocent Israelis who are in Israeli jails. It really is sickening, and I think there is such a huge emphasis on anti-racism, there's such a huge emphasis. I mean, there's so many people who wouldn't dream of criticising gay people, black people, any other minority, who somehow think it's okay to criticise Jewish people and to say that Jewish Israelis who have been taken hostage are in some way fair game.
Yeah, absolutely right. You know, we live in an era of extreme sensitivity around issues of racism. You know, if you so much as scuff a page of the Quran, you're Islamophobic. If you question mass immigration, you're a racist or possibly even a fascist. And, you know, if you even stand up for biological truth these days, you can be called transphobic. The left and the progressives are always on the lookout for prejudice, what they see as prejudice and bigotry. Yet when it comes to real anti-Semitism, violent anti-Semitism in the case of Hamas versus Israel, they are quiet. They say nothing. They just don't respond at all, or even worse, they make excuses for it. And that really is quite unacceptable.
Brendan, thank you for your thoughts this morning. That's Brendan O'Neill, who's the chief political writer at Spiked. His article is "Why Are Anti-Racists, in inverted commas, Silent About Arbel Yehud's Terrible Ordeal," talking about that hostage, that Israeli hostage being freed in Gaza, and it's well worth a read. It's on the Spectator website. Why are anti-racists silent about Arbel Yehud's terrible ordeal? If you just Google Brendan O'Neill, you will find that article. It's a really, really good one, sent to me by a listener who recommended that I speak to Brendan about that. So thank you for that. Cliff in Berkshire says the two Matthews segment illustrated exactly what is wrong with politics today. We spoke to Matthew Laza and Matthew Goodwin-Freeman a little bit earlier on. Too much point scoring, too little substance, while the two main parties concentrate on bickering with each other like children seeking their parents' attention. Reform has crept up and has overtaken them. Thank you to Brittany from the USA, who says, I'm not sure if her name's Spears, Starmer needs to wake up and smell the coffee. He needs to stop these boats before it becomes too late. And honestly, it's getting there. Labour promises to do things, and all they do is dig the UK economy into a bigger, deeper hole. I agree with Matthew Goodwin-Freeman. Great show today, Peter. Thank you, Brittany. Appreciate that. Dave says it's amazing that everyone that's involved in or supported the Labour government always says 14 years of Conservatives, but Labour had 14 years to plan and have no idea to sort anything out, lies after lies. Dave, I think you make a good point, because we were told, look, everything's costed, we've got this plan, everything's going to be fine, and then suddenly we're saying, oh no, consultation, you know, Quango, all these different organisations need to work out what the Labour government needs to do. Well, why don't they know? Paul in Buckinghamshire says, what is the truth about the RAF saying they wouldn't fly illegal immigrants to a detention centre on Ascension Island, and the Navy refusing to turn back boats if instructed by the government? I despair, says Paul. With the calibre of these so-called advisors, the Matthews, I'm not surprised the country is in the woke mess it is, says this person. Another person says, Matthew Laza saying we need a better class of politics over the Musk comment. Does that apply to Angela Rayner when she called the Tories scum? Well, in fairness with Matthew Laza, I have asked him about Angela Rayner's comment before that comes in from Jackie, and he has condemned it, which I think was the right thing to do. Angela Rayner did apologise, but she still said it in the first place. Tessa in Leicester, who would ever vote for these clowns again? You vote for clowns, you get a circus, says Tessa. And Wayne in Swindon says, good morning. The illegal immigration issue would be resolved mega fast by reclassifying them as right-wing. You watch how fast Starmer would act irrespective of his love affair with international law and the UN conventions. That is Wayne in Swindon. Thanks everybody who has messaged in. We'll take a load of calls coming up now, between now and 12 o'clock. Then we're also going to talk to Stephen Wolfe about this immigration issue. Lots of you want to talk about that. and indeed Starmer's Brexit reset, and whether that risks a damaging trade war with Trump. Stay with us.
One of his executive actions was to remove DEI from selection criteria in the federal aviation, specifically for air traffic controllers. Yeah. And during the Obama years, there were 1,000 candidates. And out of the 1,900 ended up doing a class action lawsuit that were removed from their candidacy because there wasn't, in terms of the administration's view, enough diversity.
Right.
And it's something in public safety like that. It's really important to keep that away.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Carolyn Higgins, who has been in touch, who says, a truly amazing guest you've just had on. So fortunate for him that he didn't end his life. I wish him all good health. That was Peter Williams, who we had on earlier. Thank you very much indeed for that, Carolyn. Appreciate your thoughts on that. Bob in Cheltenham has also been in touch. He says, hi Peter, great to have you back and brilliant show as always. Thoroughly enjoyed the heated debate with the Matthews. Your interview with Peter Williams illuminated and humanised the very difficult discussion about assisted dying and exposes the reality that medical professions can get things wrong. In a similar vein, I could never support capital punishment, but only because it isn't a deterrent. Not only because it isn't a deterrent, but also because our criminal justice system doesn't always get things right. Bob, I agree with you on capital punishment. I know a lot of people disagree with me on that, but that's what I think. Thank you to Stuart as well, who's been in touch. He says, Cooper is out of her depth just because she is a long-serving, experienced MP compared to the rest of the incompetent Labour Party doesn't make her any better. It's the land of the blind and the one-eyed man is king. I want to talk to Joe in Christchurch in a second, but I just want to remind you first about this big story that a lot of people want to talk about this morning, about the Prime Minister easing rules for illegal migrants. Citizenship applications will be allowed. Scientific age testing laws will be scrapped. Joe, you're in Christchurch in Dorset. I wonder how you feel about the immigration levels in this country.
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning. Hi.
Hi. Yes, I'm absolutely alarmed, and my mind's just exploding in all sorts of things about this, with worry about all this thing. I'm all for immigration to a point, but not to this level and the way that they're doing it.
It doesn't seem fair, it doesn't seem equitable, it doesn't seem safe to many people, Joe.
No, it isn't, and Mr. Starmer, PM Starmer, is trying to drag us into Europe where they're having problems. We've got our own problems. We're going to get dragged into there. We should be really looking to him, really. And, hopefully, something will make sense. Will that guy ever see sense to getting this under control with this immigration and these people coming across the water?
Okay.
It's just a worry. I'm anxious as it is. My anxiety is bad, and it's just getting worse.
Well, I don't want to contribute to that in any way, Joe. I just wonder if I just wonder if you think there is any plan here. If you think there is a way of getting it sorted out.
Well, the thing is, really, if people are coming over, they should be screened to a point. Absolutely, because we don't know who's really coming across. I don't know. My friends don't know, who actually knows who they are?
I know what you mean, and that is a real worry for a lot of people. Joe, just with your anxiety there, you mentioned there, I have it as well. I just wondered, have you spoken to your GP? Are you dealing with it?
I'm actually on medication. I do work, but I'm limited to what I can do work-wise. Yeah. But when I get up, I feel quite dreadful. But after an hour, I sort of clear a bit up.
The mornings are always tricky, aren't they, Joe?
They are. They're dreadful, actually, to be honest. But I do get through it, and I do work hard on it. But this sort of thing that's going on around us, it's affecting so many.
Oh, it's affecting a lot of people. Well, Joe, listen, I wish you well, and I wish you well with your health as well. And thanks for your opinions.
Thank you very much for having my time.
Very good opinions as well. So thank you for that. Louise is in Kent. Louise has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. What do you make of this, Louise?
Well, I can't understand why they're not learning from what's happening in Europe.
Yeah.
Because for open immigration in Germany and Sweden has been terrible. Gangs taken over, youngsters, 40 pressed gangs. When they're closing everywhere across Europe, stopping immigration into Germany, Holland, Italy, and yet we're opening the door. 4 years' time, we're going to be saying, we've got the same gang problem that they've got in Sweden.
Yes.
And, of course, that's what's been happening in America, with gangs coming up from South America. Where are we not learning with all of this?
It's a very, very honest and reasonable question, Louise, to say there are so many different examples. We've seen what's happened in this country, and there are lessons to learn, and we hear all the time, lessons will be learned. It just doesn't seem that's the case in this instance anyway.
No. And the other thing I was just going to quickly say about wrong diagnosis and anxiety.
Yes, go ahead.
I was diagnosed as bipolar 40 years ago. It's now been realised it was wrong.
Right.
I've been off medication for 4.5 years, went into terrible withdrawal. Of course, my anxiety exploded because my emotions have been depressed for so long.
Yes.
I've worked in mental health as well, got very badly bullied out of the local mental health trust in my work. But one of the questions, if they think immigration helps our, work problem, which it doesn't, and we're all saying we've got all these thousands of people off work, particularly with mental health problems.
Yes.
One of the things that I've always questioned was getting rid of sheltered workshops in the name of equality and diversity. And I certainly think in mental health, you could get back in some sheltered workshops where people would go, they would be looked after while they learnt the necessary skills to go back to work, were able to earn something as well and contribute, and generally feel better for themselves. Yeah. Because
well, what about you, Louise? Are you feeling better? Have things stabilised for you?
Much better, yes. The withdrawal has taken me about 4.5 years.
Wow, my goodness.
I'm doing well now. I mean, insomnia was for a year. The anxiety exploded.
Yeah.
I was very lucky because I work for the local mental health trust. I was very lucky to get some access to psychotherapy. But the doctors just said, "Well, if you think that'll help, you can have it." But that was it. Once I rejected everything, they almost wash their hands off me because I wouldn't take the medication.
Well, Louise, listen.
Now I'd be left very frightened of anything anybody wants to give me.
Well, Louise, listen, I wish you well, and I hope your withdrawal and your recovery continues. And really interesting points there on immigration as well, so thank you for that. Simon's in Basingstoke has given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Simon, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I'd like to say I think we can see, we will see that there is one thing that the Labour Party is very efficient at, and that's bringing in new, more legal and illegal migrants. And I think we'll soon start hearing the ground be prepared for amnesty, and also that it's grossly unfair that people have leave to remain, are contributing to the country, and are not given the right to vote in national elections, because Labour, the only way Labour stands a chance of winning in 2029 is if they create at least 5 or 6 million new voters, and I believe that's exactly what they will do.
Okay, interesting point, Simon. Thank you for it. That's Simon in Basingstoke there. Thanks to Max in Warwickshire. He says, hi Peter, I'm so ashamed of this Labour government. Since they have been in power, all they have done is to ruin Britain. Why? What's up with them? Go Richard Tyson, Nigel Farage Reform Party, says Max. Al from North London says, politics is rotten to the core. It is not just the responsibility of the government to control our borders. The UK is being invaded and nobody is making an effort to stop it. Never before have I felt so afraid walking through London. It doesn't even feel like the UK anymore. What is this government up to? It's like a horror movie. Starmer has a hidden agenda. He wants to completely eradicate the UK nationalists. Brittany says, Brittany's been in touch again and says, my surname isn't Spears. I wish it was. But for you, of course it can be, says Brittany in the US. Wow, that's wonderful. Oops, I did it again. Brian says, 1 million migrants mean 1 million future votes for Labour. Let's be honest, nobody else with a brain or an ounce of pride or common sense will ever vote for Labour again, says Brian. And Jane says, what a lovely man Peter Sefton Williams is. I'm just heartbroken for him. God bless, says Jane. And thank you to everybody else who has been in touch. There's lots of calls that I'm going to try and get through as many as I can between now and 1 o'clock, because there's lots to talk about. We'll talk to Stephen Wolfe as well in the next hour about this migration issue. It's a really, really pertinent one. We'll also talk about Starmer's Brexit reset and executive orders by Trump to place tariffs on Canada, Mexico and China, of course, as well. Steve Gill is going to be with us in a second or two on the other side of the news. Let us know your thoughts as well. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you for your company. I'm here between now and 1 o'clock. Lots to discuss, lots on the migration issue. We're going to talk to you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Get your voice on the air. And also, Stephen Wolfe will be here a little bit later on in the hour. He is, of course, from the Centre for Migration. I can't remember exactly what his job title is, but certainly he knows an awful lot about migration. He's a former MEP as well, and he's concentrated on this issue for some time. Thanks to Jess in Dover as well, who says if we're really unhappy with levels of migration, we need to step up and do the jobs migrants are brought in for. Move back to the cities and streets, which have become monocultures. Wringing hands and waiting for politicians to sort it won't achieve anything, says Jess in Dover. Very, very interesting perspective there. Keep yours coming in. We'll talk about America as well and Starmer's Brexit reset. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, and remember the main number does three things. You can ring me for a live discussion on the air. I can see the phones going and we've plenty of people lined up between now and 1 o'clock. We can also send in a WhatsApp text message or a voice message. We're going to get some of those voice messages on the air as well between now and 1. Loads to talk about. Let's keep the conversation going between now and 1 here on Talk. Mike in York makes a really interesting point. He says, great show, Peter. Thanks. I consider myself a well-balanced and reasonable individual, but I find myself increasingly hating and despising our current crop of politicians because they're abandoning our country to economic and cultural disaster, says Mike in York. I think a lot of people feel the same way. I think a lot of people feel very disconnected from Westminster and what the politicians do there. Well, one electorate that feels very connected to its president is, of course, the American electorate, and how we interact with America is a very, very important thing, especially with Starmer's Brexit reset, which has been alleged risks a damaging trade war with Trump. Well, let's talk to Steve Gill. He's a former advisor to both Clinton and Bush administration. Steve, hello. Thank you for talking to me today. I wonder if you could just give me your reaction to the executive orders that Trump has signed to placing tariffs on Canada, on Mexico and China. Certainly, they achieved his objectives in regard to Colombia. Will they do so with Canada, Mexico and China? The floppy-haired fascist himself, Justin Trudeau, in Canada, not happy.
Yeah, Justin is already telling Canadians that they should absolutely avoid Florida orange juice. Wait till the people in Canada get a taste of that Calgary and Vancouver orange juice. Yes, they don't even grow oranges there.
Famously, oranges grow rather beautifully. Canadians have milk in bags as well, which I've always found quite weird. But they did give us Joni Mitchell, so that's all right. Anyway, Steve, sorry, continue.
Well, I think that the problem that the Canadians and the Mexicans have is that the trade imbalance is so great. I think the U.S. imports just about 17% of what we get from Canada. They import about 85% of what they get from us, about the same as with Mexico. So a trade war that they want to grow this into, rather than bending to what Donald Trump has asked, quit allowing illegal immigrants into our country through your borders, quit allowing fentanyl and other products, and let's back.
Oh, we've slightly lost Steve there. See if we can get him back there in just a second. I'll read out a couple more messages just while the top team behind the glass try to get Steve back. Neil in Lancashire says, watching the two clowns you had on your show earlier on, the Matthews, was cringeworthy. Two cheeks of the same backside trying to defend the indefensible. I voted Tory for nearly 50 years, but never again. I remember Labour governments of old, so could never vote for them while I have a hole in the relevant place. They have both shown themselves to be untrustworthy, lying shysters, and the British people are seeing right through them, says Neil in Lancashire, making quite a few references to his bottom there. Anyway, Steve Gill is back with us. Steve, we had a slight problem with your line. Sorry, you were cut off on your prime, cut off mid-thought. Tell us your thoughts there on those tariffs.
No, I just wanted to point out that while we get about 17% or so from the exports from Canada, they get about 85% from us, the same as with Mexico. So if Justin Trudeau, if Mexico want to get involved in a full trade war, rather than bend to what Donald Trump has asked, quit sending fentanyl and drugs across the border, quit sending illegals across the border, and let's find a way to balance the trade imbalance. Rather than do that, they want a war. They will lose, and they will lose badly, and their consumers will lose more than Americans. Again, Justin Trudeau saying, hey, let's quit buying, bourbon and whiskey from red states. That would be Tennessee and Kentucky, and go with rye from Canada. Again, I think Jack Daniels will thrive and continue to thrive, while the Canadians may be deprived of their bourbon. And as long as Justin Trudeau is your premier, you need to be drinking heavily.
Yes, and he's going fairly soon. He's forgotten but not gone, in the case of Justin Trudeau. I wonder what you make of it for us here in the UK, Steve, because Starmer's Brexit reset, we are told, risked a damaging trade war with Trump. How do you think Trump will be treating the United Kingdom when it comes to these economic issues, and specifically in regard to tariffs?
I think it's interesting that Trump is saying he wants to deal with the EU nations directly, individually, rather than dealing with the EU apparatus, go to a more direct country-to-country process. And I think that certainly benefits the UK as well. And I think that the direct interaction with Trump and the Trump administration will ultimately benefit Britain. There is great, connection between the British people and the American people. Our governments don't get along all the time, and I think Starmer has certainly made it worse. Starmer's making it worse dealing with people in Britain. So I think that the relationship with the UK and the US will always remain strong. But Starmer and his government are not only doing damage domestically, they're doing damage internationally.
Yeah, and that is a very, very interesting point. I mean, how much patience do you think Trump will have with the UK? Because obviously it's an important trading partner, but we generally give services to the UK rather than goods necessarily. So tariffs could be a little bit different, couldn't they? Certainly when it comes to the comparisons with other countries like Canada and Mexico.
Yeah, and I think that the trade imbalance with Great Britain is not as dire as it is, for example, with China. I think that's where the big hole is, and I think that's where you're going to see the tariffs have a bigger impact with respect to China. The flow of goods from China to the U.S. will have a bigger impact on consumers if the tariffs go into place. But China is already on some thin ice when it comes to their domestic economy. And they're already having problems. Their real estate boom has come to an end. Their trading has declined. Outside of some of their major cities, it is still a third world country. And I think that they also bear the risk of getting into a trade war with the U.S., much more damaging to them than I think any relationship between the U.S. and the U.K.
Steve, thank you very much for your thoughts there. That's Steve Gill, who's a former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations, giving us thoughts on Trump's tariffs there. Dave in Portsmouth has been in touch and says, Peter, I just searched how to overthrow a UK government. My goodness. Guess what? It was one of the most searched questions recently. Funny like that. How long can the UK go on like this? Surely not the next 4 years. Well, yeah, Dave, I think there's a lot of frustration around. Labour were voted in fair and square. Maybe we should change the voting system. Maybe that's part of it as well. We can have a debate about that if you want to. 0344 499 1000. Colin has been in touch and says, 30 years ago I owned and rented out property somewhere for asylum seekers from abroad. They got free rent, given a lump sum of about £1,000 each, and brought up from Dover via a taxi with an interpreter. My homeborn tenants at the time had to fight for everything. I got nothing. I cancelled the contract with the government at the time because I could not live with the guilt of it. I went on then, and it still goes on now. Thank you to Kenny in Edinburgh. Hi, Cardi P. You and the callers are totally right in that what Labour are doing on immigration makes no sense at all. The infrastructure isn't being increased, and yet millions are being helped to get there, with the taxpayer still paying for it all while it's being put to the back of the queue in preference to migrants. So some people in politics that allows this stuff must be benefiting personally, because politically it's suicide for their future in politics. And in Barrow in Furness, Tony Tucker says, Peter, with no age checks, that will happen when what will happen when a schoolgirl is raped or a child is stabbed? Will Starmer cover it up like the Refuse FOIs or cover up of grooming and rape gangs? That is Tony's thought there. Let's get another one from Emma in London, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Emma, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, I would like to say, put it this way, I don't know what Keir Starmer's doing to London. 1 minute he says he's going to crush the gangs and everything. Next minute he's letting everyone in, and basically, and he's giving them the votes, the right to vote. when they come into the UK?
Well, if they, I mean, they don't have that automatically. You need to be a citizen in order to vote.
Last time I saw somewhere, they've got like if they're in the hotels, they've got
they don't have the right to vote if they're in the hotels, Emma. But what happens is that if they get citizenship, which now there was a law to try to stop people getting citizenship. Well, that's now being scrapped by Keir Starmer. But clearly, you have a lot of concerns around this.
Yeah, I do, because I've heard that they've got the right. That's why he's letting them in and everything. How many from your radio
they don't at the moment, Emma, anyway.
As well.
Okay.
That's what they've got the right to do. And basically, I'm not working. I'm looking for work. I've applied for 500,000 jobs, and not one job has come my way. In that respect, all the boats have come across. You can imagine where the jobs have gone to.
Yeah, no, indeed.
You can imagine where I'm like one of the British citizens, law-abiding citizens, and everything. What is it? When I contact my MP, she doesn't want to listen.
Right.
She said, I'm going to get authorities onto you. So what
Emma,
is he doing?
I wish you well in your search for a job there, Emma. I hope something comes your way and life gets better. We've quite a few voice notes that have come in. I want to hear from Nick on immigration. Nick has sent one in.
Morning, Peter. The reason we have an immigration problem that is easily solvable is because successive administrations haven't wanted to solve it. It's as simple as that. And it all boils down to the fact that a divided nation, which we are increasingly more divided the more immigration we accept, a divided nation is far easier to govern than a nation of solidarity. Have a good day, Peter.
Nick, thanks for your thoughts on that. We're asking the question, why is Labour not making our borders safe? Tell us your thoughts, 0344 499 1000. Sue in Cambridge says, Starmer is a snivelling cretin. He's a sensible person, just common sense. And the person, Elon Musk, who made that remark. Starmer is a snivelling cretin, says Sue in Cambridge. He's no doubt got a snout in the trough. And also, isn't he flying in the face of his highly intelligent Chancellor? I thought she was after deregulation while he's secretly signing us up to the EU again through the back door. Will be taking all their immigrants and being ruled by the EU without any of the benefits. Well, there's certainly no suggestion that Keir Starmer has a snout in the trough or that he's doing anything illegal. Max in Warwickshire says, Peter, I'm so fed up with Britain's taxes being used in a game of cat and mouse with the Conservatives, Brexit, Labour being pro-Europe, etc. What a waste of our money that could be used for so many other projects. Jenny in Hampshire is on the line, 0344 499 1000. Jenny, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, good morning, Peter.
Morning.
Yeah, I'm absolutely disgusted. I don't think Starmer should ever have been allowed to have come in the position he's in with his background. I mean, we all know that he stood up for migrants.
He was elected fair and square, Jenny.
I quite agree, yeah, elected, but people should realise what he did for his living and how he treated the British public then. So they can't expect him to treat us any better now.
Or any differently. Yeah, that's a very fair point, Jenny.
I think he's very anti-Christian, anti-British and anti-democratic. He has no time for the indigenous people of these islands. All he wants the people of these islands is to foot his bill for all the migrants that are coming in.
Why do you think he's undemocratic, Jenny? I'm really interested in your thoughts here. Why do you think he's undemocratic?
Because of what he's doing. He's not doing what the people want. I mean, I know that I blame the last lot for allowing this lot to get in.
Yeah.
But he just doesn't. There's nothing about this guy that's British.
How would you fix it? How would you fix it, Jenny?
Pardon?
How would you fix it? How do you think things can get better?
Crikey, I mean, at this point in time, the only way is you couldn't trust Conservatives to get in again. I mean, I'm in my 70s and I voted Conservative all my life. I will never, ever vote for them again. And I will certainly not vote for Labour. Mm-hmm. So the only choice we've got, which I think if they do get a chance, I think reform could put our country back on the map where we should be in a decent position, not dragging us through the gutter and the drain, which is what Starmer's doing.
Jenny, thanks for your thoughts there. Impassioned call there from Jenny in Hampshire. Let's hear from Ian in Hemel Hempstead on immigration.
Peter, I don't understand Matthew at all. There's no quick fix. There really is a quick fix. Leave the ECHR. and get the Navy to turn the boats back. That's the quick fix. We're far too advanced in this to worry about what France thinks and all the rest of it. It'll do France a favour. If they know they're not coming here, they won't go to France.
Thank you, Ian, for that. You can send in your voice notes, 0344 499 1000. That's the same number for phone calls. You can text me, 87222. I'll have a look at my WhatsApps and, well, my personal WhatsApps, I suppose, but also the Twitter traffic during the break, and I'll make sure I read out some tweets as well. Let me know your thoughts. This is my show, but it's your show too. We're going to take more of your calls after the break. We're also going to talk to Stephen Wolfe about immigration a little bit later on in the programme. So stay with us here on Talk.
A lot of these kids are saying, well, I'm anxious, I can't go to work, I've got disabilities, I need to be on benefits.
Yeah, and why not? I mean, if they are suffering with a condition that is medical, which is recognised as anxiety and depression are, then they should receive treatment for that and support for that. If part of that process of getting better means that they're sick and they cannot work for the time being, then that's just part of life's cost.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's hear from Ian in East Grinstead on immigration. This is what Ian has to say.
Hi, Peter. It's Ian from East Grinstead. Listening to them, Matthew and the other gentleman talking about the reduction or making it easier for people to come here. I wish they would just face up to the facts. Just stop giving all these freebies away. If people arrive on the shores, stick them into an armed detention camp, which is patrolled, process them and send them back home. Stop giving them hotel rooms. Stop giving them money. Stop giving them food. Stop giving them phones. Stop giving them bicycles. You know what? They're here illegally, so kick them out. They're criminals.
Ian, thanks for your thoughts on that. Anne's been in touch on text as well. It says, Peter, one of your previous colours hit the nail on the head. Labour are importing future Labour voters and rubbing our noses in diversity. Bob says, Sir Davos Starmer has a plan and nothing to do with the policies of net zero, economic disaster and crime. They plan to import and legitimise 5 million new voters to, excuse me, to enable them to win in 2029, says Bob. One person says on Twitter, Labour don't want to do anything about immigration. They hope these people will eventually vote Labour. Another person says, anyone remember Remploy, the great organisation that worked really well for those involved? Why did they end it? Craig says, this is shambles. What's the point anymore? Why don't we have a 500-foot sign saying we have no money, go elsewhere, on the cliffs of Dover, broken councils, broken government, broken Britain. And one more, they haven't lost control. They are controlling it in a way they want, totally against what the majority of the nation wants. They're openly enacting an anti-border, anti-nation, anti-British policy. Well, let's talk to David in Glasgow. David, what do you make of this? David's giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You're very welcome on the air.
Hello, David from Glasgow here.
Hi, David.
I'm just getting very, very frustrated about the past years. I'm actually 73, and this has been going on for years. We really need to put a stop to these boats coming in. Now, this is going to sound really out of this. It's really, this is what I'd like to do. Just people get together and put the boats back themselves.
Okay, so you think...
Is there a law there?
Well, I mean, I can't advocate vigilante action, David. I mean, but that does show what you're saying absolutely shows that there is a lack of trust in the authorities to deal with this. There's no doubt about that, David.
Any party, they're all the same. I would imagine if reform get in, they'll talk good, but nothing is going to get happened.
Yeah.
We really need to get... If the people get together, I'm sure we could do something in the channel. I'm sure we could.
We have enough forces to do it. It's just a matter of political will. David, thank you very much indeed for your... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Anyway, thanks very much. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. Thank you. Obviously, can't advocate anybody taking the law into their own hands there. It has to be what the authorities do, but we should influence what the authorities do. We should absolutely be very clear in our opinions, and this is one of the places you can come to have your say, the home of common sense, the home of free speech. This is Talk, and thank you to David for putting his point across. Suze has been in touch and says, Starmer was elected fair and square. No, he was not. He was elected on a mountain of lies, and I will never understand how this is either acceptable or legal. Thank you to Dave in Portsmouth who says, oh no, I've read that one out. Amanda in London who says, Starmer and immigrant votes, they say you should be careful what you wish for. The time will come when the immigrant vote will go to their own appointed MPs, which will lead to the downfall of this country, says Amanda. Brad and Bister, Sadiq Khan was voted in fair and square, but like Starmer, the majority of people seem to not want him, says Brad and Bister. Well, Brad, the majority of Londoners voted for Sir Sadiq. I was not one of them, I can exclusively reveal. Vote for reform, says this person, but if then they carried out the necessary extreme acts to remedy the situation, the violent left would riot. It's too late. Just saying. Let's get another voice note, this time from Anna in Surrey on Keir Starmer. This is what Anna has to say.
Peter, Starmer hasn't been duplicitous. Starmer's always been openly pro-immigration, pro-EU. He is doing as all other Marxist dictators do, whatever he wants, irregardless as to the thoughts, needs and wants of the indigenous population. What none of you seem to be grasping is he does not care. He doesn't care what we think, like all dictators. The only way things change is if he is removed, and he's going to make it as difficult as possible. No one will move him. The immigrants are voters. That's how he looks at them. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about education. He doesn't care about finances. He doesn't care whether he'll let our pensioners die for the sake of 300 quid a year. What you all need to do is wake up to the fact he is nothing better than a nasty, cheap diktat. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Anna, very strong opinions there, and thank you as well to Anna for keeping her message to less than a minute. That was 59 seconds, so well done, Anna. Lots of strong opinions in there, lots to react to. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Let's get another discussion point from Alan in Salford, who's given me a ring. Alan, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good morning, Peter.
Hi, yeah, it's just gone the afternoon, but you're very welcome to the programme.
Good afternoon, yeah. I think people in this country are really stupid because before the COVID, about 3 months before the COVID, Mr. Lammy said there was 350,000 legal immigrants and he wanted to give them amnesty. Well, we know there was more than that then.
Yes.
You know, so I knew what they was up to, and I think they're really doing it. But as for growth, the first thing they're doing, they give the public sector massive rises. They give $6 billion to the Great British Energy Company, $6 billion. All over the world now, they're giving money for net zero. And the only growth they're actually doing is growth in immigration.
And growth abroad as well. I don't understand why we're giving money away to people. We're borrowing money to give money away, especially in with our foreign aid budget. I can see sometimes the merits of foreign aid having some sort of idea, but if you can't feed and clothe and keep people warm at home, Alan, surely that should be your priority.
Of course it should, but also let me touch on that the Green New Deal and everything. I remember reading an article 2 years ago, well more than 7 years ago it started this, and he said the first millionaire, renewables millionaire, wouldn't make a profit for 10 years.
Yeah.
And they're all millionaires made by investors. This is what's wrong, and it's investment that's, you know, and it's crippling us, and the government are investing so much money in this. It wants scrapping. We should do what the Donald says over there. I wish to God he was over here with us.
Alan, I think a lot of people will agree with you, certainly on the Donald. It'll be very interesting to see what he says on tariffs and so on. Thanks for your call, Alan, appreciate that. Thanks also to Nick Moore, who's been in touch on text 87222 with the word talk in your message. Peter, under no circumstances should new immigrants be given the vote. People need to have contributed to this country financially and socially for at least 10 years before they get the right to influence our politics. And Gary says, I'm pretty sure that Labour's thinking is that if they legitimise these illegal immigrants, they will all then be working and paying tax, but of course it also means that they will be able to access the benefit system, and I think we all know on balance how that works out for the Treasury, says Gary. Clear thoughts and sensible thoughts from so many people coming into the building. You can send us a voice note, remember, on 0344 499 1000 through WhatsApp. That's what Mark in Essex has done. He wants to talk about immigration. Let's hear what Mark has to say.
I think you need to have a look at Sweden maybe to see how unfettered immigration is working out for them, and you can see that it's going the same way in this country. All these people that keep on justifying having thousands and thousands of people coming to this country without any documentation, that is our future, and it's getting worse and worse. Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And Dave in Northern Ireland has been in touch on Keir Starmer. This is what Dave has to say.
Good morning, Peter. Dave from North Down here. If you cast your memory back a few months, I sent a voicemail in describing this government, this Labour Party, as traitors to the common cause of the people. And you said I was wrong, and you thought that Keir Starmer was a patriot. A patriot. Look up the word patriot. He has done nothing for the people of the UK, and he thinks of those people in, what do you call that thing? Across the water there. European Union. Good show, mate.
Thank you very much indeed, Dave. And Dave, a classic and very good example of how on this programme we disagree without being disagreeable. So thank you, Dave, for your thoughts on that. Lots more voice notes coming in, lots more calls coming in. You can get your call in 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can send your voice note on that number as well via WhatsApp. You can text me 87222. I'll have a look now, of course, at Twitter as well, see what people are saying on there, and read out a few of those messages as well after the break. We'll also be talking to Stephen Wolfe, who's Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, and asking, why is Labour not making our borders safe? What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much for all your comments and all your texts and tweets and so on. I was actually gassing with Stephen Wolfe. I didn't even have a look at my Twitter, but I promise I'll do that in the next break. Stephen Wolfe is, of course, the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. It's great to have you in the studio because there's so many people, Stephen, who are so annoyed about what the Prime Minister is doing. Just take us through this story today, because he's easing the rules for illegal migration. Citizenship applications will be allowed. A lot of people worried that illegal migrants will have votes eventually, and that will change the complexity of this country. And scientific age testing, that law is to be scrapped.
Yes, I mean, this is actually quite a disgraceful change in the policies that were only enacted very recently under what was the Illegal Migration Act, but it became a policy that was important to Conservatives and Rishi Sunak. And that was brought in really because there were deep concerns, as we've shown on this show many times, about the numbers of people coming across the boats claiming asylum, saying that they were children. That's now going, and that's wrong. And the opportunities to test them are going as well. The secondly is that it was banning people who were coming over on the boats from being able to claim asylum straight away and making them illegal, and putting it into statute that it was doing so. But now he seems to be opening the door to allow them for citizenship to be able to come very, very quickly. And so this is sending out a message, a very strong message to the people smugglers, who we know roughly made about 5 million this month alone, that here is a very strong marketing tool for you. Tell your people, give you the money, we'll get them on the boats, and now this Keir Starmer government is going to allow them to be relatively fast-tracked to citizenship once their asylum claims have been approved. And here is the last point in the asylum. We knew that Rishi Sunak was allowing many asylum applications to go through very quickly. They changed the Home Office policies. This is happening quickly, so what you're now seeing is very many more people coming across on the boats, being granted asylum. Then they'll be able to vote just as they can when they get the citizenship.
Well, they need the citizenship first, though, don't they? They
yes,
need to be able to be
do.
here for some years, and actually the law would have made it more difficult. But there are real concerns about this.
Oh, I think so. And what's the concern is that the stats that I was on a show this morning that was arguing about the 1 in 12 illegal migrants in London. Some are saying it is, some it's not. But what is clear is that there is a number that's nearly 1 million people in this country that are not meant to be allowed to stay here. They've either breached their visas or they've come over illegally. And why should they be able to have some form of rights in the future when they've got here illegally, claim asylum maybe, and then get into having votes or housing or hospitals or health ahead of everybody else? But secondly is the change and transformation of the population of this country. The ONS announced that they believe that there would be 5.2 million more people, mainly from immigration, by 2032. Our studies, I ran through the numbers, talked through on the show with Jonathan Portes, who is a government advisor for many years. I'm saying it's 6.9 million. What that means...
How do you come up with that figure?
Well, because what the estimate for the ONS is that they believe that net migration is going to go down from historical high of last year of 1 million down to 300,000 or 330,000. We've seen that because they're saying less people will want to come to this country for work. We've done a very minor tweak and just said it's only 525,000, which just is half of the number that we've got averaged over the last couple of years. If you keep those numbers going through, then by the time you get 2040, this country will have 80 million people. Bearing in mind that at the time of 1990s, we had 59 million people. This is a 30% increase. We can't afford it as a nation through taxation. We can't afford it in the amount of land that we have because we become a dense nation, house building, roads, schools, infrastructure. And all of that matters to people who are calling in because they're already seeing the vast changes to this country.
Yes, they are. Why do you think Labour is doing this? I'd love to have asked Yvette Cooper. We did ask her on the programme this morning. She was speaking to other programmes this morning. She didn't speak to us. Why do you think Labour's doing this?
Because they're wedded to a group of economists who believe that increasing population increases GDP. That's fine. Increase in GDP is the figure that she can use to say, look, we've got growth in this country. But there is significant research out there now saying that GNI, or gross national product per capita, that's the amount of money that we've got, GDP, in the country divided by the number of people, is declining. Well, that's absolutely true. Everybody looks out the window and sees how much that they're now having to pay for additional costs in their lives, but they're also having to see that they're being charged more at council tax for the infrastructure of their councils, being charged more by the government in taxation to pay for the hospitals, the schools that are coming from huge numbers of people coming into this country. And I keep pointing now to research by the United Nations that has said that where you get large-scale mass migration into a country and that leads to a population boom, it will lead to amongst 4 or 5 very distinct issues of declining economy. Poverty will rise. Cost of living will rise. People's density and mental health issues will rise, and we're seeing that in cities. The cost of social services will rise, and ultimately that costs the country by being more fractious and less friendly to one another.
It's interesting, just in regard to a couple of the specifics of this, Stephen. We've seen that some of these were really plans in terms of the scientific age checks. They were never actually implemented, and some of the laws that Labour are repealing and changing through their big bill this week haven't actually been implemented yet. But we do know that in the first half of last year, more than 1,300 illegal immigrants were caught pretending to be minors after their cases were flagged by civil servants.
Absolutely. We know that there are large numbers of people who are claiming to be under the age of 18 and children that are actually not, because they know that by doing so it enhances their opportunity to get a positive asylum claim. Yeah. That is wrong. All that does is to say it thwarts the system. And it actually, those who are genuinely young people will suffer because of the impact that we have on the overall system as a whole by saying it fails. And we know it's failing. But what it also shows is 2 things. One is the lack of courage of the Conservative Party's policies to actually push this through. As many of us said, it's window dressing, which is why a party like Reform is being able to challenge them so strongly, and why you've got Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch struggling to make any impact on people who are saying that we believe in now strengthening immigration issues. But it also shows really the weakness of the Labour Party, who are wedded to these economic ideas that bring in more and more people, that we need to fill our hospitals with people from places like Zimbabwe now and other countries in Africa, because they have done deals with Thailand and Philippines who are saying you're just taking too many of our people. And so we're going to increase the numbers of people here dramatically. But do we genuinely believe it's going to improve growth? I don't. I think it's actually going to cause the opposite.
Stephen, thank you. That's Stephen Wilther, who's Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. If you have some thoughts on what he has had to say there, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're going to take a load of calls right up until 1 o'clock. We'll take your voice notes as well. You can send those through WhatsApp. Stay with us here on Talk.
One of his executive actions was to remove DEI from selection criteria in the federal aviation, specifically for air traffic controllers. And, you know, during the Obama years, there were 1,000 candidates. And out of the 1,900 ended up doing a class action lawsuit that were removed from their candidacy because there wasn't, in terms of the administration's view, enough diversity.
Right.
And it's something in public safety like that. It's really important to keep that away.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Kelvin has been in touch on immigration. He sent me a voice note, 0344 499 1000. Let's hear from Kelvin.
Good afternoon, Peter. The problem we've got with this government is we've got two bungalows running the country. Neither of them have got anything upstairs, and that's Starmer and Rachel Thieves. And they're not going to stop the votes. They don't want to stop the votes because, let's face it, they're going to give them the rights to vote, and then we'll be their next voters. So they're not going to stop the votes, are they? Let's face it. This country is doomed. Before long, you won't be able to call it Britain or England or anything like. More like a third world country with a name like Bangladesh or something. Anyway, have a good day. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Kelvin. Thanks also to Wirelass on Twitter, who says, I'm hearing frustration and even anger from your callers today, certainly from Kelvin there as well, about the state of the country and the actions of politicians. We are reaching a tipping point, I fear. Scott Lewis says, Labour do not care of the dangers they allow across the border. So long as it's an extra vote for them, Parliament is corrupt to its core. Let's hear from Cass on globalisation in another voice note.
Hi, Peter. When are the British people going to realise it's all part of the global agenda? Nations without nationhood, countries without borders, intermingling, entwining all races, colours and creeds together to create a one world order. When are we going to realise that? They don't want to change anything or shut the borders. Wake up!
Thanks, Cass. Thank you also to Dan, who says free speech isn't real if people self-censor out of fear of being labelled racist or sexist. Critical thinking means knowing when to say something, not banning thoughts. Saying I'm proud to be white and English or wanting stricter borders isn't hate. It's an opinion. #free speech, says Dan. This person on Twitter says 4 new laws will tackle the threat of child sexual abuse images generated by artificial intelligence. The government has announced. That is the announcement this morning. Meanwhile, in the real world, grooming gangs are still prevalent in the UK. Richard says Labour are deliberately putting the people of this country in danger. Let's hear from Claire in the Wirral on Starmer.
Afternoon, Peter. Claire from the Wirral here. Starmer is deceitful and a liar. Starmer doesn't believe in borders, he doesn't believe in Britain as a nation, and he doesn't care for the British people. He is a closet Corbynite, a globalist and a Europhile, and that's all he cares about. And he has had that agenda from day one. If he could be eradicated, that would be my wish for Britain. See you in prison, folks. Thank you.
Claire, thanks for your thoughts. We don't want any politician to be eradicated, certainly. I think she means taken out of office, which is fair enough. And Claire, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts on that. Andrew's in Hertfordshire. He's given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Andrew, what would you like to say? You're very welcome to the programme.
Good morning. You do a crackerjack of a job. It's not as bad as people are actually looking at this moment in time. If you take a step back, it doesn't matter how many immigrants have come across or if they're potentially going to give them the vote. If you just take a look at the 3 decisions they've made that have made them really popular. Number 1, the winter fuel. Number 2, the farmers. And then number 3, the public schools. All those families have at least 10 members. So that will negate anything that comes across.
You think they're signing their political death warrant as a result of those 3 policies?
and others. I mean, you know, the fact that on the 26th the OBR reports on the show we're in recession, that actually will be when it really turns. And then the local elections, you'll see reform will storm through, because every Sunday you come on your show and do really well, but basically the Sunday papers are writing the reform political agenda and the manifesto, aren't they? I mean, it's hilarious if you look at it. But if you look at Starmer and you look at the type of person he is, what he actually does is he is a lawyer. So he's very good at going into a courtroom and bullying people, hiding behind his ethical duty, which is not to prevent the facts or even the truth. He loves to present his evidence and test the opponents. So all they're doing is bringing policies out and testing them with the public. And, of course, then they're telling us that this is going to be good. And, of course, it's just not working, because the value of a product or service is determined by the person receiving the service, not the person giving it. And what we're seeing here is really bad politics. He's not suited to politics. And they'll run their course, but they won't do 4 years. After the local elections, he and Reeves, they've got to look at it and say, that's not a winning formula for us at all. It's actually very interesting. I can understand how people would be apoplectic with rage, but we're living in really quite interesting times. He really is failing.
Yeah, it's a very
on every level.
Very, very interesting points you make there, Andrew. Very thoughtful points. Thank you for that. That's Andrew in Hertfordshire there. On migrants, Paul in Tyneside has sent me a voice note. Let's hear from Paul.
Hi, Peter. Great show as always. Paul from Tyneside. You know, with all the illegal immigrants and stuff like that, we've got a multitude of large, empty RAF bases all around the country. And these places are huge. They've got massive hangars. They'll house thousands in there. And they're heated, they're lit, and they're fireproofed as well. Okay, we've got a regiment, the RAF regiment. Nobody really knows what they do anyway, but anyway, we've got the RAF regiment. Okay, they could control them, cordon them. That's what they are, force protection anyway. That's my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate that. I've got 4 calls I'm going to try to get through between now and 1 o'clock. If anybody else wants to try and get in, 0344 499 1000, you're very welcome to. Also a voice note from Ian in Nottingham we'll try to get to as well. But let's speak to Nick in Lincolnshire first. Nick, what's your opinion on all of this? You're very welcome to the programme.
Hi, Peter. Nice to speak to you again.
You too.
I'm not by nature a conspiracy theorist. I'm much more like to follow Hanlon's razor. You know, never ascribe to malice that which can be adequately explained by incompetence.
Yes. Cock up rather than conspiracy.
Yeah, but if you look back over the last few years, everyone from Johnson, May, Sunak, Starmer, I can come to no other logical conclusion than they're deliberately trying to destroy the country. I mean, if you look at furloughs, lockdowns, printing cash causing inflation, migration, legal and illegal. I mean, just look at schools. My nephew is 14, mixed race. And he got shouted at and called a bigot at school, which isn't in London, a few weeks back for telling the girl behind him to shut up because she was purring because she thinks she's a cat.
Right, yes. I think she's probably not a cat.
Yeah, I would suggest that she's not a cat, and if she is a cat, she shouldn't be in school.
Yes, that's a very good point. I mean, it is utterly ridiculous in so many different aspects of the way the country is going. What do you think the solution is, Nick?
Well, my only cause for hope is that, A, what's happened in the US, because there's been a massive rebellion, and I don't think anyone has really expected Trump to get in a second time, is that in this country, looking at the polls and stuff, I think there's a very real chance that if they don't get in, I think a Reform are likely to get over 100 seats next time, which is going to massively change the sort of political map in this country.
Yeah, it's going to be a really, really interesting election next time round, and those local elections as well are going to be fascinating. Nick, thanks for your thoughts there. That was Nick in Lincolnshire. Ian in Nottingham, let's hear his voice note.
Very quickly, just listening to some of the voice notes, callers. I have to agree. Starmer and his stormtroopers and his Marxist government left-wing friends, they live in a bubble. They live in a different world to the majority of the people in this country. They know and deal with none of the problems that we do. They are not involved in what they impose on us. They live in a bubble. They have free medical care. They live in gated communities. They have private schooling. and they do not experience what we do. We, the people, need to rise up against politicians who are disingenuous, liars, and offer us nothing. They do not represent us at all, ever.
Strong opinions there for me in Nottingham. Certainly you can rise up at the ballot box, you can cast your vote, but there are lots of questions about whether people actually believe in that anymore, and the fact that you have a government that has about a third of the people who actually voting for them. I'm not saying for any moment that Labour aren't legitimately the government of this country. They are, of course, so no matter how annoyed our viewers and listeners are, they are legitimately the government of this country. But there are questions, and I think there's a debate to be had about the nature of our democracy, the nature of PR, whether the proportional representation, whether there's a different way to vote to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. There's clearly, I've rarely heard such anger, actually. I've rarely heard such annoyance, such worry, actually, from so many people this morning. And I really do fear for the future of this country. I really wish Yvette Cooper had come on this morning. We did ask her a couple of times. I'm going to ask again, actually. I'm going to ask her people whether we can perhaps chat to her, because there are so many questions I have for her about immigration. I know there are a lot that our viewers and listeners have as well. Let's get a couple of more perspectives before we end the show. Harry is in Portsmouth and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Harry, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, yes, hello. Good afternoon, Peter.
Hi there.
Listening to the conversation that's been going on ever since David Bull, actually, earlier on as well.
Yeah.
You've got to remember that the Labour Party has always been an international party, ever since it was set up, because they were tying themselves in with sort of the Russian Revolution type thing. I think even Churchill called them Bolsheviks.
Yeah, I don't think they're Bolsheviks anymore, though. Do you, Harry?
No, but they're international, so they will always put the international before the home, which is how they aren't that bothered about loads of immigrants coming in, because to them it's just part of their international process. And of course we've got Keir Starmer, who was named after Keir Hardley, the originator in sort of like the early 1900s. It all seems to be so far embedded in that they can't see beyond anything else other than their manifestos from past years.
Do you think things will change in any way, Harry? We've got Labour for at least another 4.5 years.
Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. I mean, I was glad that Farage put the Exocet missile through the Tories, because it enables the Labour Party to be exposed for what they really are. And that was a good thing, but of course it's that risk of 4.5 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're pro Europe. That's another thing. You know, they will always put Europe before the UK, which is why Starmer, when Corbyn was the leader, and since, he's continually flicks over to Europe to have his secret chats over in Brussels. And of course, the other thing where people have mentioned, like Stephen Wolf mentioned, the GDP, basically we're overtrading. It's like you're setting up a little shop and you're doing what looks like great guns, and you sort of extend your shelving high up and it wobbles a bit on top, and then you extend out the back into the backyard, then you put an extra story on, and it all becomes what the accountants called overtrading.
Well, I know what you mean, Harry. I think a lot of people will agree with you. Thanks for your points. I really appreciate them. Ben in Plymouth says, I believe Labour know they're on borrowed time, so they're running wild with policies before it all collapses. Very similar thoughts there to Harry, I think. Tom in Shropshire, great to see you back and well. Thank you, Tom. I can't help thinking this country died with the Queen. God bless her. I wonder what Cliff in East Yorkshire thinks about that. Cliff, what do you make of what's going on at the moment? Thanks for your call. Cliff, are you with us? Cliff in East Yorkshire?
Hello, Peter.
Hi there.
Now then, I believe that there's an hidden agenda with this government, with the EU. They don't want to upset them by stopping all the immigrants from the north coast of France, which is creating absolute bedlam over there with all. There's hundreds of thousands. I mean, I've travelled that route many a time because I've just come back from Spain to live.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So you know, I mean, it's a big political thing with the French. They can't be seen to be stopping immigrants when it's making their problem even worse.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, there is an hidden agenda, and I think that it's trying to align us even better with you know, with the EU by doing this. But I mean, what I want to say to the general public is remember what the EU, because I lived in Greece as well for 3 years.
Right, okay, yeah.
And they absolutely destroyed that country, making them beg to get them out.
Yeah, they certainly had a very, very rough time, and I wouldn't want that repeated anywhere else. Cliff, very, very good points there. Thanks very much to you. Thanks also to the top team behind the glass, Chris Jacobs, the producer, Joe Stock, the assistant producer, Dave Rhodes, the technical operator, Tech Up Dave. Titus D'Souza and Faith Eden have been the visual producers today. I think it's actually Titus D'Souza and Davis Fang, if I'm correct. Yes, Faith did nothing. Parag, she sat at home and did absolutely nothing. Parag Birmingham has been the video editor. Dean Smith has been the weekend editor, and thank you very much